Once more testing. Yeah, we're gonna get back.
I hear you, but you are very echoey.
Testing once more. Can you speak?
Sounds good.
Are you able to hear us online?
Yes, it sounds good.
Testing once more online. You want to speak on there?
Yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Can you hear me? You sound good.
Okay, I think that's the best we can do. All right, let's try to record and continue here. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna put my phone right here, and everyone has to speak up if you can. Sorry about the technical difficulties there.
Thank you all for your patience. We should go back to recording. Talk to them. Appreciate your patience. And this is for general public comments. If you want to talk about the item on spending soon, that's the agenda item. I call you clarification.
Yeah, thanks for that, Foster. Speaking in a second, Casey Locke's comments in the beginning. Sorry about that. Matt Foster, second Casey Locke's comments about the land proposals for the city. I moved to this part of the city from downtown Los Angeles specifically for the schools and for the density of what South Pasadena is, and that's a pretty safe place to raise my daughter. And I think, well, the bar for Los Angeles is rather low in terms of safety for sort of families traversing a city. South Pasadena, I think, has a really neat opportunity to kind of lead the way in that, and that the design proposal I told was quite compelling. Sort of improve safety for everyone, not just us. So yeah, I think that is something I'm super interested in and really love to see that go forward. Thank you.
Well, any on Zoom?
That's fine.
With that, we'll put a comment for the general comments, and then we'll move towards presentation for the Fremont project. Director Gerber, thank you. Thank you for your expertise as well tonight.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we're doing our best here to. So sorry, there's a hand. No. Sure.
Mr. Siegel, the budget hand raising on comments.
Yeah, apologies. It's still pretty tough to hear you, but I guess you're dealing with some issues, so I'll be quick.
Yeah.
So hopefully, Michael Siegel. I came in a couple of months ago to present on the Marengo Elementary Active Transportation Program and how great it's doing at getting kids to school, biking and walking. And that our ask to you was that we need safer infrastructure. Looking over the Marengo safety study, we had the 85th percentile in every single segment of Marengo was over the speed limit. People just don't drive safe. You can put up all the signs you want. It doesn't matter. And we need your help. And this project would be transformational for the city and for our children. It would actually give them safe infrastructure to traverse through the city. It's what we need. And listening to the comments that you guys had, the last meeting on this is very disappointing. And I hope you guys see that we could make our city, like, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. We're not going to see this money again for a long time. And we have an amazing design from Tool. We have to move forward with this. It's the only thing we can do to really make our city livable. And I really hope that you guys recommend to council to move forward with the tool design with this money.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So tonight, is a continuation of the presentation we started, in October. We were doing a number of things. We were taking a look at the design memo from Tool Design Group that came out of the SHREP process that started, in the fall of 2023. And we're also focusing on the Fremont Huntington project, and the reason for that is we're trying to move from the planning phase into the environmental and design phase for the Fremont Huntington project. And part of that work is developing a scope for the environmental and design consultant to take some of the tool design ideas, some of the commission's ideas, and some of the other concepts that we've been working on for these corridors over time, and start to pull that together to eventually come up with a set of plans, specifications, and estimates. But we fully understand that in that process, they're gonna have to iteratively come through a couple alternatives to arrive at what we will install in this project. Now it's worth reiterating that we believe that the designs and the tool memo are probably multiple projects that could be phased out over years. We're really just trying to carve out the first set of those projects underneath what we have as far as funding goes, which is about $17 million for Fremont Huntington. So last month we went through some of the Fremont design concepts. We'll just kind of scroll through those slides. We just kind of slowly scroll through those slides, Philip. And we don't need to revisit all these, but if there are questions or we want to return to any concepts here, or we want to talk about some of the earlier discussions in the tool design memo, we can do that before we move on to say some of the Huntington design concepts.
Chet, I was hoping that we could just spend a couple minutes on that U-turn proposal. I guess it may be out of the scope of what they were going to do, but it was a suggested project. And we also have another project we're considering for the loop ramp, which would relieve the congestion at Fair Oaks and the Arroyo Sequel Parkway. So I asked that we go to that before we dive into the Huntington projects, if okay.
Absolutely, yes. Philip, do you mind jumping to the attachment? So when we executed this process with tool design, even though we knew the initial focus would be on the Fremont Huntington corridors, we didn't want to not tie in Fair Oaks, because obviously these are all tied together and they're connected. So the charrette process included 3 corridors, including Fair Oaks. Now we'll likely be able to tie in some of the Fair Oaks ideas into either the existing north-south ITS corridor project, the future MIP project, which right now is focusing on Regalia and State Street and the future loop ramp, and then a couple other small projects we have. So we did ask Tool to give us the design. Philip, I want to say it's like page 25 or something like that. Jump to. It's a picture of. If you want to keep going, I will find it here. It's a picture of the Fair Oaks. There we go. Yeah, go a little bit further. All right, go back. Can you zoom in one page back? Yeah, and then can you zoom in the lower right hand corner? So while folks pulling that up, one of the ideas that was proposed, because when tool design came in, we gave them every resource we had. We gave them all the various master plans we had, all of our project plans, what our future projects were. And one thing they took a look at was the congestion conflict situation at near State Street in the Valley of 110. So they offered up a solution here that is intended to be an alternative to the loop ramp idea, which for everyone here would be basically a right-hand entrance. Trying to describe it, basically, you're just driving north on Barrows, and instead of taking a left turn to go south on the 110, it would be a new ramp that you would turn right to loop around and go south on the 110. So Tool's idea here was basically to acquire the right of way farther north along Barrows, just south of Columbia, north of the war border, to create basically what they call like a turnaround or a U-turn. And you can see that here on the screen. So again, it would expand to what is currently private property, but the idea is the city would acquire it in order to turn people around so they can head south and enter the 110 south on the existing southbound. So that's one idea that they came up with.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that. Sure. Okay, this is an interesting concept, and I hope it will be fully evaluated. If it could be shown to work, it would possibly be a replacement for the loop ramp idea. So I'd like it to be fully evaluated, but on the other hand, I think there could be some practical problems with it, and I'll just point those out. This U-turn would be a quarter-mile north of the current on-ramp. So instead of being able to turn left or right to get onto the on-ramp, you gotta travel a quarter-mile north. You make the U-turn, then you gotta go a quarter-mile back to the south. So that'd be going half a mile out of your way. That's one issue. The other one is that you know what it's like to make a U-turn at a busy intersection. Since you're turning wide, since you're making a half circle, you do it kind of slow. So you really need signal control to do it safely. You're too exposed out there. So it would require a signal. But the other concern is that we know what the queues are like southbound on Fair Oaks, going south of Columbia. Oftentimes the queue goes back to Columbia. So if you want to make a U-turn, traffic may be queuing back too far for you to be able to enter the traffic. So I think a queue analysis needs to be done there. The other thing is that right now you can make 2 lanes going northbound to turn left to get onto the on-ramp. This would require you to do 1 lane as a U-turn. So you can I just wanted to point these out because it could be very difficult to do, but I hope it's fully evaluated. Thank you.
Absolutely, and just to add to that, that's our current plan, is to fully evaluate it. This is folded very nicely into our current plan for the MIP project, including the loop ramp, which we've already scoped to include multiple alternatives to evaluate. The loop ramp being one, the do nothing option being another, a diamond ramp being another option. And so we've asked our consultant that's preparing the environmental, who had already been working on this project, who is now helping us develop a funding agreement with Metro to add this as one of their 6 alternatives that they were going to analyze as part of that project. So that will be that full evaluation.
What point is he mentioned, Commissioner Fisher mentioned the need of a signal, which is not rendered in this drawing concept. So that would be another element that should be considered as part of the evaluation. If you're only looking at this versus some alternatives to this with time signal.
Sure. In our conversations with Tool, though, it might not be represented in the drawing, they did, consider a signal for this location, so I think that there would be some sort of, gated signalized process here at the left turn. And it wouldn't be an open. So when we model it, that's what we do.
Sure, I guess a clarification, is it a quarter-mile long? I thought it was closer to.
I haven't measured it, but,
I did measure it because, you could tell by the silhouette of the apartment buildings.
Okay,
And so I measured it on Google.
okay. I thought it was closer to. Like 1,000 feet, or a little, under 1,000, okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ted, just a couple of questions on the financial piece of this. So it's around 17 million. And that's for the Fremont and Huntington project, which is what we discussed at the last meeting. What we're going to be discussing at this meeting, right?
that's correct, yeah.
And this is what we've just been talking about. That is not part of the Fremont Huntington.
No, so Fremont Huntington includes the entirety of Fremont, from Columbia to Alhambra, the entirety of Huntington, from Alhambra to Garfield, Atlantic, and then the intersection of Fair Oaks and Huntington. It doesn't include any of the other components of Fair Oaks.
And the 17 million is measure and measure R.
Yeah, there's 6 million of Measure M MAT money and 10 million of Measure R MIP money.
And is the 17 million, do we have an allocation as so much is for Fremont, and so much is for Huntington, or it just depends on what this process results in?
Sure, so the allocation is actually for both at the same time, so the allocation, Philip, do you mind jumping back to the slides? So, the $6 million active transportation grant includes both Fremont and Huntington, and the $10 million mobility improvement grant also includes Fremont and Huntington. So the allocation isn't so much about the different locations, it's more about the eligibility under both of those grants. One seeks to increase pedestrian active transportation elements. The other is essentially the transportation system management alternative from the cancellation of 710. So it's intended to meet the needs of mobility as a result of 710 access.
Last question for now.
Sure.
Is there any piece of this that's being considered as sort of a reserve maintenance? So a lot of these proposals include some pretty impressive landscaping and striping measures and such. And just given history, I'm wondering, is there going to be some amount of money that's set aside to maintain all of this once it's installed, or is that just going to be general fund? Or
It's a good question. All of this money is designated solely for environmental design and construction, no maintenance, no right of way acquisition. So maintenance would have to be through, maintenance of concrete and pavement would be for our existing avenues, gas tax, local Measure and Measure R money, general fund and SB1 money. Other landscaping, of course, would have to be through our lighting and landscaping management district or our general fund landscaping amounts. So yeah, there's no additional maintenance set aside for this project. Now, there's already landscaping along Huntington and Fremont, so whether or not we expand that would really change the amount that we need. If there's not a wholesale change in landscaping elements, or if there's maybe even a reduction in sort of like high maintenance landscaping elements, then hopefully that we can manage those maintenance costs out of the project.
thank you.
And just 2 questions. One is on this, but should the money get allocated for the food grant potential? Should that be deemed that we would fill out some fund with the feasibility for the U-turn alternative? Can that money then be redistributed elsewhere? I mean, obviously we need some of it for the elements we need, should that be a desired outcome? But could the rest of the money have be utilized elsewhere. And the other question is, the money though in the 10 and the 6. Can that also, I thought some of that was also going to be able to cover infrastructure such as bus shelters, bus benches, some of those mobility related support infrastructure items that we might want.
Yes, so the answer is yes on both questions. Phil, do you mind advancing the slides? I couldn't do it here on the, right there, perfect, so those two next. So to the answer to the first question, right now, the city has essentially allocated its measure, its 80 million measure our MIT money into 3 locations. 10 million of that is to this project. It's the 10 million measure R component. The other 70 million are focused on the loop ramp project and the 110 northbound off ramp project. So you know, let's take Pasadena for example. Pasadena had a $240 million allocation, and they had a slew of projects they were evaluating with that money. Even more project value than they had funding for, because their strategy was now our projects are going to move forward, and so you know they'll utilize the money on the most highest priority projects. So you know, contrast to that, we have our money focused on a couple of projects. If we were to not pursue those, then we would have to evaluate what other projects they would be that might be eligible for. On the note about bus shelters, so one thing that we'll discuss tonight when we get towards the end of the presentation, we'll come back to this slide. So you know, these funding agreements are somewhat older now, they're several years old. These maps basically they're hard to see, but they dictate what the scope of these funding agreements are. And if you look to the right, you'll see things like, you'll see a little R that says ramps improvements. You see a little bus with a green line, it's a bus platform, and a little purple bench that says bus platform and new bench and track receptacles. So at the moment, this is what's scoped for this project. And so you can see there's about 35 Rs on this screen. So you know, 35 of the 47 or so intersections that are touched by this project are already slated for ramp upgrades. And then you have I think about 8 or so bus platforms and 3 new bench and trash receptacles already planned in the project.
Thank you. Sure.
One more on my favorite topic, funding. So I'm glad to see that the U-turn will be evaluated as part of an alternative to the loop ramp. If that, you know, we have what, $80 million, if that project is $100 million, who pays that 20? If we get into the project.
Yeah, we'd have to find another revenue source for that.
Okay.
Yes.
Do we have any federal money right now that's outstanding? You know, I think a lot of agencies have been looking at other federal agreements with the change of the administration, trying to execute those before January, thinking that the new administration might not be favorable to California. As well as just Metro, I think Metro needs $3 billion to deliver the Olympics and Paralympic Games, and if they're not funded through the federal government, likely, you know, I think it could impact some of our ability to get Measure A and Measure R funding if they're using that for.
Sure.
I think I'm just thinking that we might not have as much funding for transportation that we've had.
Yeah, competition is very tight. So in fact, we have our $9-10 million Morgan federal money that's being put into the Fair Oaks signal upgrade project right now, and we're actively spending that. We have a small amount of federal money that designated for the rectangular rapid flashing beacons that we're trying to maintain. Other than that, we don't have a whole lot of federal sources. We did apply for the SS4A program, and we found out, I think yesterday or the day before, that we were not selected for that. It was highly competitive. Many cities were, there just wasn't enough funding for everybody.
Okay,
Yeah.
but as far as the cost increases on whatever happens at the energy would be our responsibility, right?
Yes, if we want to move forward with that, and you know, at the moment, both sides of the interchange are scoped, so we would have to we decide to move over that project, we have to maybe reconsider that.
Okay, and that analysis looks at risk of each one of those, like, it would look at the risk involved with each.
Yeah, it's a pretty comprehensive, you may remember that, we looked at the scope as a commission, some months ago. It's taken that long to actually get the funding process underway, that's pretty typical. But yeah, it's a very comprehensive environmental, safety modeling evaluation, that would yield, prioritization of those alternatives. Okay, so let's jump forward here.
Let's see, doing this roll to the left back.
Oh, I think it's working, I'm almost there, I think. There we go. Okay, so to jump back onto Huntington. So just like Fremont, we'll start that process by, what are the objectives of this project? And again, tool scope was really, the primary focus was to bring community groups together, get conversations going, find out what the problems were, where we need to focus resources. It was really a planning step before the design process, and that was the value of doing that. So they found the objectives of the Huntington project were to reconnect the city across the system, across the corridor there, increase the quality of life people will live along Huntington, which includes single family residences and multifamily and commercial. Increase the active along businesses along Huntington. You see that in some slides, especially the south side and Fair Oaks. And then reduce the traffic volume and speeds along Huntington. We know that we found that we have some instances of speeding, especially on that curve there that you see near Pine and Port Street there on the east side. So recommendations that came out of tool design process were interesting. The largest, most comprehensive thing you'll see is the road diet for the entire street. So right now, we really consider Huntington to be 7 lanes, 3 lanes in each direction, and then turn lanes in the middle. In some locations, there's a drivable median in that Huntington, as you're familiar. And so across the whole corridor, tool recommended reducing that down to 5 lanes, and we'll look at how they did that. They proposed separated bike lanes, and that would offer some connectivity. LA on the southwest side has a bike lane currently. Alhambra is planning a bike lane from the southeast side. And then, based on how San Marino and our other San Diego Valley cities configure their sections of Huntington Drive, it's possible to have a bike corridor.
So the remodeled area and kind of incorporating your China with that area for part that was recently reconfigured and resurfaced, and they got it 5 minutes there.
Yes, I was doing that too. Thanks for that comment.
I'm sorry, what was it?
In the unincorporated area on Huntington Drive, right where you get to, there's an area between Arcadia and the Downs, and
yes.
you get to an unincorporated county near Chattanooga. That whole area near Sunny Slope water system there. Yeah. That whole area is be resurfaced and reconfigured and then got
One question, did they reduce travel lanes or they kept them the same?
They lost some part of it.
So the interesting thing about that is I think that section, Huntington is actually wider than our section is. Ours is 140 feet, and I feel like theirs is even much larger. So I don't think there was a lane reduction in that area.
Yeah, they widened it, put bike lanes, and in Los Angeles, they prohibited parking. Because, between Monterey and, Mission Road, there isn't much frontage there, so they prohibited parking. That's how they have their bike lanes.
So in the tool designs, you'll see they've added shade trees, active trees, valley gutters, bulb out trees. A frontage street that we'll take a look at, interesting idea. Oh, yes, Jerry.
That because that's the tree, we can't cover tree with our money.
We could, it's just a matter of, you know, landscaping is a potential sort of thing you could use the money to spend, that just depends on how you're doing it. So if you're adding, you know, medians and bulb outs, I think a tree would be acceptable. I don't know that you can just go and start planting trees in existing areas, but it's just interesting.
But each new infrastructure is part of it, the funding will cover the cost.
Sure, I mean, the city isn't lacking in terms of its ability to fund planting of new trees. There's other limiting factors, so I don't think trees would be the issue, it's more so like location for plant trees, irrigation systems, water. Exactly.
Okay.
So we'll look at that frontage street, and then another interesting idea is the Pine Street transformation. Take a look at that too. So, this is the existing cross section of Huntington. This is important to remember, because we'll be talking about this. So, 140 feet across. You have 45 feet typically of pavement on each side, the eastbound and westbound sides. So 5 feet of sidewalk, 10-foot landscaping buffer, 10-foot parking lanes, followed by 3 lanes, 11, 12, and 12 feet wide, and then a 20-foot landscape median. So this is the typical proposed cross section that Tool is suggesting. Quite a massive reconfiguration here. It's still 140 feet, of course, but what they throughout Huntington, they're showing the sidewalks on the edges have been widened, a landscape buffer, and then a separated 8-foot bike lane on each side. And this is possible because you'll notice that there's a full lane reduction going both ways on Huntington. So they have that 26-foot median, but they have 11 and 10-foot lanes east and west to maintain parking. So getting to the details of this, I think the most significant recommendation they made was how to address the tie-in for all 3 corridors. So you see Huntington going from left to right here, east and west, that Fremont Avenue on the left, and then you have Fair Oaks going north. So things to focus on here are the reduction of the lanes along Huntington, so that paved area going east and west. Is that you, Phil?
That's you.
Oh, that's great. So the paved area here, but what Tool is recommending is this frontage road. So you can see here, and this is really the primary reasons for this are number one, to to reduce the lanes, but also to provide access to these businesses. So they're suggesting that that folks that are driving eastbound can access the businesses by entering a one-way entrance on this frontage road here. And they can enter these parking lots. And then people who are coming either westbound or south on Fair Oaks can enter here or enter here. And so that's a new idea. Another pretty significant change is removing the existing ramps. So if you're familiar with Fair Oaks, right now there's these curved ramps that go north and south here. And the advantage of that was the Tool felt they could reduce speeds and bring in a little bit more order of operation to this by basically squaring off intersections. And then where you see those asterisks are then just highlighting opportunities for additional park space. Now, needless to say, this is an incredibly complex and expensive configuration, but just a very ambitious and interesting idea for Tool design. So let me just jump to the next slide and make sure we didn't miss anything. So this is basically a cross section which you just saw, just so you can see how the frontage road configuration would work. There are other cities that have frontage roads along Huntington. It really just depends on the cross section. And so here, these are the things that we just highlighted. The frontage road, this explains how motorists enter that frontage area. What Tool called the Huntington Farrell's high-speed turn right channels will be removed. And then road diets, shortening the pedestrian crossings and providing space in the frontage. Okay, questions and thoughts on this? Of course, we can ask now, we can talk later, I keep going, however you wanna.
I'm trying to figure out, your bike lane is where, from the bike.
Sure, so the bike lane is actually separated, so you'll see the green line. Up right, you can see it here, so in that early, in this cross section, yeah, in this cross section here, you can see it on the very side. So they represent it here as these, green lines. These rose colors are parking, and then this takes the frontage. So here's the other bike lane here.
So the frontage is only on the south side.
Exactly, yeah, because this, access to businesses here, seems fairly, easy. I think this is, Spruce here, and then you have. No, that's an alley. Oh, that's an alley, that's right, Spruce is right up here. And that's, so you have an alley, and then you have these, driveways right here. The issue is, as we all know, is it's hard to get to the south side of, Huntington unless you know, we have that idea currently to take a turn and then allowing turns into here. So this would eliminate the need for that configuration.
And so if I'm going westbound, and this is Fremont, so where you've got that, where you go to the right, with the cut, take you up next to Barclays, that takes you up then Fremont, so that we eliminated that.
Well, no, you can still drive here and take a right here. I don't know if that's what you're asking.
No, that's with the right going north. So, you know.
Oh, yes,
right now
yeah, so
it's
they
got
remove that small sort of.
it
Exactly.
don't look at the frontage like you're thinking, because it's got a separate.
Yes,
To go,
right
northbound.
here, yeah, that's
It's not a.
sure, yes,
But we eliminate that with this configuration.
exactly, yes.
So I have a couple questions about the frontage road. So, Ted, the folks who are on the frontage road heading east, and they're approaching the intersection of Huntington and Barrows, okay? You with me? So you're on the frontage road, you're heading east.
Entering from Fremont?
That's my next question.
Okay, sure, gotcha.
What I'm trying to figure out is people who are leaving the frontage road, right, they're exiting from the east side. You're correct?
Yes, they're supposed to be going this way,
Yeah, so from west to east. Yeah, right?
yeah,
Okay, so when they get to the end here, what happens? They force it to right and go south?
sure.
This is,
We noticed that too, likely that's supposed to probably allow turn this way, otherwise they're in, and then this loop. So yeah, I see what you're saying, that look, that sort of implied they can only turn right. Yes, but I think that in practicality, you allow them to be a lot better.
okay, so they take a left and then access Huntington that way.
Yes,
And
exactly.
they could go north.
They can go north on Farrow, so they can take a right, or depending on the phasing of the signal, maybe they can take a left over to this way.
Okay, so you're heading south on Farrow, so you're approaching Huntington, and you want to access this frontage road. How do you do that?
So you'd have to be in this lane, I believe. You'd have to be in this lane that's south to here. And I think these two lanes turn right.
So it's a two-way frontage road for the entirety of it or most of it?
For most of it, up until right here, it's hard to see, but this is one way up to here, and then there's like a big connector there. And then the rest of the sides are this winter. This is all two way.
Thank you.
Because I think right now, because if you're looking at this as your ferrous going on Huntington, you're basically, your frontage is, you're basically dead end. An office building. So you need some sort of signal, probably that if you're coming out of Frontage Road and you're gonna make a left, you're not Huntington.
Sure, so, Phil, could you drag it to the left a little bit? Sorry, the other way. So, likely this would kind of be treated like any other sort of like, parking entrance configuration, with people who are entering and exiting the, business area have the right of way, and these people have to yield. So you probably don't need a signal here, obviously definitely need a rather, complex signal configuration here to manage, all of the lines of traffic. But you probably get away with it not, here.
Because you kind of have that island signal that's sitting out there now when you make a left-hand turn going southbound on Farrows, going eastbound on Huntington.
Right, so that would be, that whole signal system would be removed, because right now, you basically have signals over here, existing configuration, you have signals over here. And you don't have any signalization, here, you just drive down, so.
So it would be a traditional four lane.
Exactly, yeah.
I guess, so I'm understanding, this is super, I've been through this intersection a thousand times, and I've thought about this, I guess. You think about, you have businesses along this stretch, and this is a lot of change for them, right? The benefit of this is it, I guess, access for these businesses, is that the chief, the primary benefit, am I missing that there is a safety benefit to this frontage road?
I think there's multiple benefits, so access is one, not just vehicle access for parking, but by adding this bikeway, right now, there's a sort of interesting, it's kind of like, two-stage refuge crossing to get to the south side of Huntington. So this would make, pedestrian access. Yeah, exactly, yeah, kind of like over here, yeah, kind of goes like diagonal. So there's that, in theory, safety improvements, because you're reducing speeding coming down.
Right, I get
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah.
And especially it reduces that. People do fly on this turn, so I do see the benefits worrying about, but I was thinking about the frontage road in particular, because there are so many businesses along that. Really communicating, articulating benefits to them. It's critical, right?
Yeah,
So just understanding that more is it, so it sounds like access, but to these businesses and potentially some public increase.
yes, exactly.
The one interesting point to your safety, the one thing this might also provide is more safer parking, because we've had so many rear ends with people flying down and not realizing the parking is the parked cars are parked cars, thinking it's a lane, they just smash into the back of the car. So if you've got this somewhat buffering your parking, that might provide more of a security, because you're down here in business and you're not gonna be speeding on this frontage versus the speeding that we currently have on a regular street.
Sure, so you can really configure the parking on the frontage road in a number of different ways, depending on how much space you want to use and what the width of your medians are. I mean, right now they have parallel parking on the south side, but other ideas are diagonal parking, things like that. And then to your point, you have this bulb out here to sort of tuck the parking in on the north side. So yeah, there's a bunch of different ideas that tools share. You can see over here, there's parking on both sides of the one-way area. So additional parking, as Commissioner Dunlap mentioned, and like you said, sort of separation of parking.
I remember in the pandemic, when we were reviewing comments from businesses at that point. when about that left turn from there, like existing right now, there's already a divider in the middle of the main to prevent people from turning into those businesses on the south side. So just having this frontage street alone of a calmer way to enter the businesses probably be a benefit for them.
Ted, what was the perceived problem that generated this frontage road concept?
I think it was, I think it's multiple things. Locally, I think it was access to businesses. I think corridor wise, the desire to add bike infrastructure, separated bike infrastructure and reduce speeds is what led to the lane configuration you can see. Because it's not, the lane configuration here is the same as you see along the entire tool recommended corridor. So I think like locally it was its access, but generally, you know, the same cross section from in.
So as you're proceeding westbound on Huntington, how do you enter this frontage road?
So if you're heading westbound on Huntington, you would take a left here and enter the frontage road right here. So I have to be very careful with, I think very precise with my pointer, but it's right here, yeah. So you're taking a left, basically. Hopefully in a better line I description.
Which currently right now, you would still need to make a left there and go all the way around the block to enter from Fremont to.
Yeah, currently our operation is actually to go down past Fremont and take a U-turn farther southwest.
And what,
Because we removed the U-turn Fremont, that we put in the right turn.
Yes,
going
exactly, yeah. It was a strategy there.
so what driveway is opposite Fair Oaks Avenue on the south? Who does that serve?
It might be helpful, you know, Bill, do you mind pulling up the,
I think it's that office.
Which,
Yeah.
the big office, four-story office building is right at the intersection. And Bagnell and real estate
if you
there.
don't mind, just pop up, browser, yeah, thanks so much. It's good to see.
Then there's the cleaners. The,
Yes, you go
yeah,
through all
or
the
the office
yeah.
corner.
Yeah, that is good. That's the one. And then you turn on the Saturday. Zoom a little further with this Corolla law firm. Zoom in over here. Yeah, right there, exactly. Yeah, so it's a little offset, but that's the private.
Okay. So as you're coming south on Fremont, you know, it'd be better if you went to a street view.
Oh, sure, of course. So please, your question again, Commissioner.
I was trying to figure out what driveway is served.
Oh, yeah.
Generating all
That's right
traffic to
there,
go
yeah.
to it and to signalize it. Okay. Thank you. And as you're going south on Fremont, how would you enter that frontage road? You have to go way far south into the intersection where you would interlock with the northbound left.
I think what you would likely do if we didn't, it depends on the signalization here. I think, if we're not able to do this, it would basically be somebody moving in this way and driving in like that. I don't know if we've given much thought to whether this is possible to come this way, and like you said, on the far, take a turn.
So you'd really have to adjust the nose of the island here, that asterisk, to enable them to
Yeah, to
make a
enable
180.
that.
right turn, U-turn to get into that driveway.
But while still, allowing people to make this transition. Now, much confusion. From north to, eastbound.
But you'd have to adjust that radius as well, right?
Yeah.
So it's square off.
Exactly.
Could you go back to the other drawing that shows the cross section?
Sure. Go.
One of the nice things about having these separate roadways for all the different modes is that they're separated, so they're not going to collide with each other. One of the problems that they found with having the separation is at the intersections, where you have a right turn hook problem. So as you can see, if you're on Huntington and you want to make a right turn onto the connecting street, well, you've got to cross the frontage road, you've got to cross the bikeway, and you really can't see those conflicts. They are so far to your right, and especially with bikes, they are behind you. So as the bike is proceeding at 12 miles an hour, you won't be able to turn your head enough to see them in time. So that then requires special faces for the bike and for the frontage road, and it very much complicates things. So that's one of the things to be aware of when you have all these widely separated roadways. Looks good at mid-walk at the intersection. It could be problematic.
It is difficult. We did look into that a bit, understanding the complication. What one solution that others have implemented are just basically heavy technology integrated intersections where literally CCTV cameras that have areas of the camera that can automatically detect a cyclist so that they can change the phase, or you can put like a digital warning sign that there's a cyclist crossing at the car at the intersection. Very complicated to configure. We've seen it done with these Bosch cameras, like newer Bosch cameras, but to your point, sort of overcomplicates the interface between the different modes.
Okay. And looking at the cross section, I want to point out that it would be possible to provide separated bike lanes without reducing the lanes. Take a few feet off the island and still have a landscape median island. You could take a couple of feet off the parking area. You've got enough then for the bike lane and a few feet of buffer. So, I just caution that if we're going to recommend a road diet on Huntington, that we have the data available or the analysis available to know that that the 2 lanes would be enough without causing congestion and cut through the neighborhood streets.
So I think that's a good segue into a point that I wanted to discuss. Is that clearly a reconfiguration of not just this area, but all of Huntington would be very, very expensive. It might be something that we have to phase out over a long time. And given even though it's a lot of money, it's somewhat limited in terms of what we can scope. One idea is so there's 45 feet of paved area on each side of Huntington as it is. One area that we're exploring, we'll discuss further with our designer, is whether or not we can make a change to the lane configuration as is and maybe accomplish that bike lane. So, in some ways it might be like a foot short, but if you could imagine, an 8-foot parking lane with a 2-foot buffer lane with additional warning devices along that lane, whether it's delineators or whether it's those I forget what they call them, but basically those kind of mounds that people can drive over, park. Yes, exactly, armadillos, exactly. That people can park over, but don't really restrict it. And then you could also make the lane reductions there to 10 feet, which is 40 mile per hour roadway, it's, you know, it's kind of borderline in terms of, whether you got a buffer there. But that's one idea that we're exploring, and that would be something that we could implement the bike plan, which has a class 2 lane on Huntington, without the major expense of the entire cross-section configuration. It's something that we might be able to accomplish into this project, without, you know, the full bore of the design recommendations we'd like to take forward. So that's one idea that we're, sort of tossing on.
I guess, I mean, but with 5 foot cross too, you have any kind of motion, right? Because the speed is still 45 miles per hour, 50.
Well,
10, right?
yeah.
Like no one's gonna feel safe.
The idea is if we implemented some of the other, recommendations along the corridor, and we did reduce those lanes to 10 feet instead of the 11 and 12, that we could maybe see that shift. What we're trying to explore is how do we do this, because even if we, let's say we did want to remove 1 foot off the landscape median on either side, even that would be a tremendous expense. And if we're gonna do that, we might as well do something more, because it's really what we're trying to accomplish as an interim measure of this project. It wouldn't really make sense to do a whole concrete reconfiguration or recalculating and all that, just remove 1 foot. You know, if that makes sense, so.
Do you need 3 car lanes in each direction? I mean, every time I drive down, maybe it's just off.
So that's an interesting question,
I mean, once you get to Alhambra, that signal, really governs Huntington's capacity, right? This was so big, it's only in front of the house, so complex that.
that's
you know,
one thought we
it's-
have is
yeah,
that,
You're traveling to what's restricting that for.
right, yeah, so that's a possibility. At least one of our funding sources, that's a pretty big hurdle to jump over to get, so the Measure R MIP funding source has some, it's not restricted, but, there's some challenges to doing lane reduction with that funding source. Even in the concept that I'm talking about, we would likely want to, repave all of Huntington Drive. The funding source that we have right now, when that money was programmed years ago, only shows like a type 2 micro surfacing in the project budget. So even resurfacing of the street is not within the budget of the project, and we have to do that to reconfigure the lanes. So that's something that we're considering in terms of we're working with Metro to increase the funding source, so that's what we'll talk about later in the slideshow. But to your point, if we want to do that reconfiguration, it's a possibility, it's just a matter of how do we afford it if we can't use one of the funding sources.
But Ted, it would seem like if you just take a couple feet off the island, you still have enough room for a left turn pocket, for landscaping, for a narrow island next to you. Why couldn't you consider that in addition to reducing the parking width and maybe narrowing one of the lanes? So that you have an adequate buffer for bikes, and you mentioned a 10-foot bike lane next to bikes on a 40-mile-an-hour street. I'm no longer a bicyclist, but I don't think I'd feel comfortable on a bike with 40-mile-an-hour traffic next to me in a 10-foot lane, and nor is a driving in a 10-foot lane, but I feel comfortable.
Sure.
Going past the bicycle.
So, you know, on that idea, you know, one thing that Tool shared with us was a cross section, you'll have in the report, was a cross section where, you know, it's a little bit more convenient for the people who are parking on Huntington, especially if they're a multi-family, you know, home owner or tenant, is having the bike lane next to the curb line. And then having the parking outside of the bike lane that's up against the lane of traffic. So that's a possibility. It just means sort of a bit of a culture shift for folks who are parking to then cross the bike lane to get to the curb. So that's one idea. On your point about narrowing the median, it's absolutely a consideration. My point with that, just if we were to do that, we'd be narrowing the median on both sides of the corridor for 1.5 miles. So it'd be quite extensive of a reconfiguration of the median. Unless we were only doing part of the roadway.
Well, I mean, so a 20-foot median as you showed here, and I thought it was wider on the other drawing that you have, but whatever it is, 20 foot just goes to 16 in the middle. So I wouldn't think that would be that much of a cost factor.
And just the removal of all the concrete and then the repaving and
But a
replacement.
new curb in and new gutter.
Exactly, yeah. So what I'm saying is, under this project's funding, it's, as far as pavement resurfacing or restructuring, it's only imagined, a type 2, micro surfacing. So it's literally put in hundreds of thousands of dollars for, that type of work, or we would need probably millions to do what you're suggesting. So again, it's a good idea, it's just a matter of how to fit it into this project versus future case project.
So regarding the question that Commissioner Dunlap raised about, do you really need 3 lanes? Did Tool conduct any volume analyses, or did they look at the historic volumes? Did they do any capacity analyses at Fremont or at the Atlantic Garfield intersection to see what that evaluation showed?
No, that would be scoped under the next phase of the project, the environmental and design phase. So if we did want to move forward with an alternative for the designer that did see an introduction, we have to do that stuff.
But what if we don't know if we want to proceed with it because we don't know if it cause congestion or not?
Well, I mean, we're looking at the next phase of this project to be a little bit iterative. We're gonna have to have the designer, we're gonna have to propose a couple alternatives that we want the designer to flesh out. And through that, doing their initial environmental work and modeling if necessary. So like, if we're just gonna do, we're not making any introductions, we're really not adjusting any sort of turn interface configurations in any intersections, we probably don't have to do a whole lot of modeling. But as soon as we start moving lanes and changing intersections, we're gonna have to do those modeling steps. And assuming that we have several different design options, the modeling will look different. So that's why it all has to be kind of scoped under that. We're gonna have to go through that process, then select a preferred alternative, and then pursue.
So if the modeling and the analysis showed that it wasn't feasible, then that
But kick
design
that
concept would be
about-
abandoned.
Exactly, yes.
Questions, and keep moving on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say I love this concept. I like the frontage road, I like the concept, at the cross section, the way it's designed. And it really is sort of forward looking, why the fact that there could be further development on Huntington, and this supports, I think, more pedestrian and cycling routes. So I think it's terrific. I agree with some of the comments that I don't understand why we need 3 lanes on Huntington. I think 2 should be sufficient. So I like a lot of these ideas a lot. It's just a couple questions. So, and I guess we're early on in this. We have the fortune of being between San Marino and the city of LA on the Huntington Drive. As far as I recall, they have 3 through lanes in each direction on their segments, right? So if we were to cut down from 3 to 2, which again, I think conceptually makes sense, that would require some level of coordination with that, right? And in that regard, I think the city of LA has some kind of measure our project forward, right? I don't know if you're familiar with it or if that there would be some kind of synergy in terms of their project and our project, but I just wanted to make that comment and ask that question.
Yeah, I think like there would definitely absolutely have to be some synergy, so we would provide our designer, of course, with the Alhambra plan and LA's project concept. If you look at LA, for example, they have an existing bike lane, and they have the 3 lanes, and their parking lane is really narrow. I don't even know if it's, well, it's hard to tell if it's even full 8 feet. So yeah, imagining that I don't remember exactly what their configuration is, but imagine they would have to reconfigure, and then Alhambra is definitely planning a reconfiguration because they proposing a bike lane.
as well. And I don't know how they're addressing their 3-lane configuration now. So yeah, they would all have to work together.
And then, these grand ideas, did I hear you right, that these are not things that would happen as within the 17 million, or they are? Because I just want to make sure, you know, when we're looking at this, the public's looking at all these wonderful, great ideas, are these things that would happen as part of this, or these further down the road?
Well, we certainly can't afford it all. We're trying to pick the pieces that make sense to do under the $17 million with an eye towards what is eligible, number one, for the funding, and what would we want to change later. So for example, you know, one idea that was suggested for Fair Oaks and Huntington and didn't make the final cut was a very large roundabout, you know, in this intersection. So, you know, if we were to pursue that and then later we're like, okay, we're gonna do this, we're not gonna, those things aren't, they're not sequential. If we did something, for example, like we did not necessarily reconfigure the curb lines on Huntington, but we reconfigured the lanes, the striping pattern, that's something that's a little more amenable to a future reconfiguration. And that's to my point, not to disparage any other ideas that are being thought up. But if we want to head in a direction that looks like this eventually, we'll basically have to pick the pieces that we can bite off now under this project. So it's not a yes and it's not a no. It's basically we're trying to thread that needle of what this project looks like based on where we want to go.
West down Huntington. Turning right onto the northbound Fair Oaks. Is that a dedicated right turn lane, or is that a right lane with a right and a through? So
It's a right and a through, because the left lane is a dedicated left, so it's hard to see, but it's a.
Okay, so folks who are turning right, which is going to be a significant volume there. They're going to be holding back the traffic as they're waiting for pedestrians or whatever else might be happening there, right? So I would just say, as we're looking at this, that let's, the concepts I really like actually, but I just want to make sure we're not creating other issues. So at intersections like this, maybe we have dedicated right turn lane.
Sure, and you sort of see that as a pattern through the tool designs on all the intersections, is that there's that parking up to the bulb out, and then they limit the dedicated right and left turn designs on the intersection. So this is kind of reflective of that.
Right.
Yeah.
This is what we have on Fair Oaks now. Okay, this concept of removing a dedicated right turn lane, right, and instead there's a bulb out. For example, Fair Oaks, southbound Fair Oaks, right. That's what I mentioned. I'm 100% against that. It's not because it's bulb out, because all we're doing is creating traffic safety issues. I'm all for reducing volumes, reducing lanes, and providing facilities as bicyclists, but we need to be aware of what's going to be safe and practical. Thank you.
I just had one question. One of the things that we have focused on and wanted to be cognizant of is trying to keep the traffic, the commercial traffic currently goes northbound on Fremont. And how can we persuade them to go on the more commercial corridor going up Paris? Was one of the reasons to put back in the red right turn arrow, etc. The one thing just keep in mind when Tool is doing this, the thought is that the traffic and the turning be conducive to be where people will see the benefit of making the right and then going in and making a left and configuring it to so they go northbound on Fair Oaks instead of the cut through, which they do in commercial. We don't want the trucks, all of that, which we currently have on Fremont.
Sure. So, you know, one thing to mention with all of the tool designs is that all of the concepts work together. In many cases, you can't have this concept if you don't implement something else that's on another page. So on that note, they do have a section in the memo that talks about having to remove commercial traffic off of Fremont in Alhambra. It has to move up Main Street to move to Huntington in order for this to work. So the idea is that you don't have that commercial traffic coming up on that short section of Fremont between Alhambra and Huntington. And so then you don't promote the ability to make that turn with, say, a tractor trailer between the two, because you're trying to move that traffic elsewhere.
Okay. Question, 2 comments. Isn't also just in line of what you're saying too, is that some of the designs and suggestions for Fremont constrict that even more. So even though some of this seems like it's limiting the throughput, the idea is everything's looking. Those Fair Oaks would still look more appealing because Fremont's gonna change so much as well.
Yes,
Correct.
exactly. Yeah, I think that's what they're trying
Yeah.
to demonstrate, and not just in South Pasadena, but in their recommendations for our neighboring cities as well. It's sort of reliant on the fact that there's a coordinated effort to do that.
And in the neighboring cities, my other question was, I know Commissioner Abelson touched on it too, but as far as the designs that are coming forward with the neighboring cities, they are also looking at lane reductions too, correct? It's been a while since I've seen the last proposal from LA, but
In some cases, so for example, we have been talking a bit extensively about the Columbia concept with Pasadena, and they're rightfully hesitant to make any sort of lane reductions on, say, Columbia, because their funding, it would be so challenging for their funding source that they're using to accomplish that. So you may have that in other cities. It just depends on their willingness to try to navigate those eligibility requirements.
and then also dependent on our move as well, right? Like if we actually go forward with something that's a little bit more forward thinking like this, the chances of them going in that direction as well and getting other grants and funding will be easier if they know that it's going to be a restrictive.
Sure. Yeah, the hope is to coordinate it so that we're both kind of like compromising a bit. It's a slow process because, kind of have to go back and forth quite a bit. But it's working well so far.
And I'll just say from personal experience, my partner rides a bike weekly along Huntington to get to downtown, and I've done it only a couple times. Terrifies me in just certain chunks, but for the most part, Huntington's dead. And the biggest fear you have is door openings from how narrow the parking is along the bike lane once you get into the LA area. But then, there's a couple congested areas where then people are using that third lane to really go fast when you're on the bike. But for the most part, it seems like, the throughput would still be able to be maintained with a reduced lane, at least from his experience. But yeah, there are people who commute downtown from here on bikes using Huntington. It is the most direct way. Safety improvements would be amazing if we have something like this.
Thank you.
Go forward.
Okay. So, this is good because we talked about a lot of the concepts that we're gonna, that are pervasive through the Huntington corridor here. Oh, sure.
For the westbound to northbound right turn, it shows an asterisk, but it doesn't show any landscaping in that area. What's intended?
Sure. They were really just trying to highlight, a new green space so that we could, the city could imagine what they want to do with it. So it's not just landscaping, it's just showing that that's like new landscaping. The northern 2 sections, they envision, little park areas, likely not on the median there. But that might be a nice place for a public art or, city signage or something like that.
So no trees there?
They didn't say that we couldn't do that. They just wanted to emphasize like this is kind of like a blank slate to do something with that didn't exist before. That's what the asterisk is for.
for any future city council people in the audience. I live in this area and I need some place to eat down here.
Sure, yeah, of course. Okay, so let's jump to the next recommendation on Marengo. So we've already spent a bit of time on this intersection because we had that study that we looked at a few months back. And so the protected bike lanes configuration continues here. You can see this, again, a substantial change to how Marengo is configured, because right now we have the class 2 lanes on the street. And here they're showing as green spaces, those green lines there, protected bike lanes on the opposite side of the parking, and then up alongside the crosswalks there. So narrow travel lanes, certainly addition of street trees. You see bulb outs there that aren't on Marengo currently. And then similar to some of the other designs we saw last month, raised crossings. And we do know that this is a heavily crossed area. Of course, you're all experiencing those issues. So this is what Tool recommended for Marengo enhancements.
And Ted, this is also where we have the crossing guards.
Exactly. So right now we have 2 crossing guards on either side of Marengo.
Ted, can you provide a little more specifics on the raised crossings? I don't know if we have a more detailed photo graphic showing them, but I need a little more understanding. Is it all every leg?
They said in the east-west direction, so we interpreted that to be well, it's hard to see, but we thought that you could see on the you could see on Marengo there that they look to be like different than what they are on Huntington. I don't know that they were recommending it on Huntington. They said the east-west directions, but we took that to mean like on Marengo there.
Okay. And the point of them is what?
So
There already, right?
yeah, there's a signal there already. So I think that the concept was that people who are turning onto Marengo and maybe they're going fast from Huntington to Marengo would have the signal to slow down and expect that there's people crossing on Marengo.
I'd like to follow up on that. If there's a signal there, how would the raised intersection slow them down?
I think what Tool was getting at here is that, so if someone's taking a right on red, for example, they wouldn't just sort of pull up through the crosswalk quickly and find their opening and then zoom up Marengo Street. They would have to slow down as they cross that raised crosswalk. That's my interpretation.
But if you're turning right on red, you are starting from a stop.
In theory, you should be. I think what they were trying to prevent was people that are just kind of rolling through that right red turn.
Yeah,
That's curious.
I really don't, I'm not convinced that raising an intersection where you have a signal does anything. If you can control the speed of traffic through your signal control, once you reach the intersection, it's too late to control your speeds.
Sure. I think that this is, to the earlier point about Tool's design ideology to remove turning lanes. We've also seen several times in the memo that they've added raised crosswalks or raised intersections at, signalized intersections. I think we saw one at Fremont and Mission. And I think there might have been another one towards the high school on Fremont also. So I think it's sort of the same concept that they're proposing.
Right.
I mean, the one thing, Ted, might be that if, we're looking at trying to look at where our dollars are going to go, this might be one element that we don't we don't go forward with because it's an additional expense that we might not need to do, that we can use those dollars elsewhere because we have a signal.
Sure, and I think that's well said for a lot of the concepts here. We'll get to it on a later slide, but we had mentioned pursuing some additional funding. And the Marengo recommendations we had are actually ones that we took out of our other studies on Marengo, the one that AGA engineers did. And then we had if you recall, we had a much earlier engineering study of this location when we looked at the crossing guard feasibility.
Is it not actually when you're going, like if you're traveling east on Huntington and you got a green and you wanted to make a right on Marengo? Is it not to reduce the speed onto Marengo from Huntington?
We thought
Right.
that might be it, but we didn't, again, like given the size and volume of Huntington, we assumed that they weren't proposing a raised crosswalk on Huntington.
No.
Oh,
I'm saying if the raised crosswalk, if the raised is between, it's going east, west, across Marengo.
yes, yeah.
Then if the you're going east across Marengo, but you can go right onto it was that, and you might.
Sure, yeah. So to my point about right turns, whether it's a right on red or a right on green, exactly.
Makes sense.
Yes,
Right on
Yeah.
red, yes,
sure, yeah.
doesn't really make sense. Right on red. Stop. Sure, but I think it's more in the line of right on green, and then I would assume with since it is the traveling bike lane race, that it also, the majority of traffic from bikes on Huntington would be going east-west, that keeping them at the same level as they're crossing that street.
Sure, and raising
The safety, yeah,
of the
increases
car, yeah.
safety for visibility and have
Awareness.
to go down and back up.
So a raised
Yeah, that's a
intersection
good point too.
raises it for all four approaches.
Yes, that's
Or
so,
approach.
Phil, can you zoom in a little bit? Not all four, so you could see how on Marengo, there's those, it looks like there's additional concrete. So to Commissioner Hammond's point, it's hard to see here, but I think the idea is that, the crossing for both the pedestrians and the cyclists. I get my, pointer up here, is raised so that this is, somewhat continuous. This is somewhat continuous. And then drivers that are heading this way and taking a right are both, they would be, they would slow down, they theoretically would slow down because of the raised intersection and their enhanced awareness of cyclists and pedestrians crossing. I think that's the idea that they're going.
The intersection is raised. The whole, if you raise two of the lakes, you gotta raise all four of them.
I think they're just raising these areas, like this concrete area, you can see here, this sort of light gray area is getting raised, and then this area is getting raised.
It's like a speed table.
Right, but it leads to the middle of the intersection, right?
I don't think in this case that they are recommending that.
How does it go up and down so quickly?
It's just, I think it has to be kind of, I don't think it's,
Graduated.
yeah, I think it's graduated slightly. They didn't give us that level of detail, but in other locations in the tool design where you see a entirely raised intersection, you see there's no contour line here. The whole intersection's raised. I think that this is not raised entirely to the level of the track. It just raised higher than the street, to sort of promote those other modes for the driver.
Like your curb access ramp descends and then it meets it like, if you have a native curve, it meets.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah.
you're raising.
So it's not coming up,
Or are you saying it's basically a wide speed hump?
Yeah, exactly.
It rises and falls before it gets to the intersection, so it's a raised crossing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a raised intersection.
Yes, I don't know, maybe we misspoke. I think they're suggesting raised crossings. Yeah.
Looking at the, bikeway. How do you handle the hook problem, right turn hook? You gonna give it a separate phase for the bikes?
Can you describe that a little bit more?
So going east on Huntington, a right turning vehicle wishing to go south on Marengo would cross the path of the bike that's physically multiple feet to the driver's right. So the driver would not be able to see the bike. So are you proposing to have a separate signal for the bike? You see what I mean?
Sorry, I wasn't
Okay.
following.
The bike, eastbound bike lane is
So
in the green band, correct?
sure, so you're talking about, right? Sorry, so you're talking about somebody who's right here.
Yes, in the green.
Gotcha, yeah.
Okay. So that bicyclist is separated multiple feet from the driver in the curb, correct?
Right, yeah.
Okay. The bike's traveling, let's say 12 miles an hour. 10 miles an hour, 12 miles an hour. So the person turning right cannot see the bicyclist coming up behind it and beside him.
Because you're talking about the regular lane right here, gray lane.
Sure.
And
So
you're gonna
I think this
you're
speaks to
making a
the,
right. So you're gonna make a right, and you've got the person going over here. How are you gonna see them? Because
Yeah,
So
so
the-
what I'm pointing out is that the national standards require that you have a separate bike phase because of the right turn hook problem. That means then that bicyclists have to wait for their own bicycle phase. Bicyclists don't want to wait. And-
I would disagree with that, though. I mean, I think because of the safety, they would definitely want to wait. I mean,
so I
Well,
think,
in-
I think this,
in my
speaks like-
experience in putting them in.
Yeah.
A bicyclist coming up to the intersection when the vehicle has a green would want to proceed through and not stop and wait
for their own way.
40 seconds to get the bicycle green.
And would it definitely be the case, knowing that there's a roundabout to increase visibility there? I mean, not a roundabout, a bulb out. Because technically with the bulb out, there isn't a parked car there to increase visibility. They have to creep up past the pedestrian crossing and the other bike crossing. So then I would think that the visibility case would be there, not necessarily.
Well, there are parked vehicles.
No, because there's the bulb out. So the-
Well, I mean, the bulb out is just like right at the intersection, but traveling at, 12 miles an hour, that's whatever,
well, I mean,
15 feet per second. So in 2 seconds, if you're far back. I'm just pointing out that, this all looks good, but you want to make sure you don't have that right turn hook problem with the bicycle.
yeah.
so I think this speaks well to the, conflict you're talking about with, separating the modes of travel, that we have that conflict because they're separated. So I think, one solution is the separate phasing, which certainly adds to, the complication of the entire intersection. But as I mentioned earlier, and we haven't really thoroughly evaluated this, it's just us doing our research in order to pass, the scope onto the designer of what we want them to pay attention to, is that we've seen this camera technology that's, for example, specifically limited to this area of the bike lane, so that when you have a cyclist entering it, the camera technology can actually track the speed of the cyclist, very similar to the radar technology that we have on our Fair Oaks corridor right now. They have these basically illuminated signs that are positioned here that turn on when that happens. It says "Watch for cyclists." There's that
I mean,
kind of thing.
with all due respect, like
Yeah.
we have a hard time maintaining our signals on Fair Oaks and throughout the city as is. I don't know. You're great, but 10 years from now, if we're going to be able to maintain some sort of camera technology, right?
Well, that's honestly, it's a good point, but
But basically, this is a protected intersection,
Sure,
right? And
yeah.
these have been done tons of places, and so it's I probably need.
I'm just
to
pointing out that
consider
there's
the
multiple-
requirement around signalization, but.
Yeah, there's multiple
Well,
solutions.
then look at downtown LA.
Yeah,
Unless
Mhm.
they had to go full.
With the bike signals. and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything. It's crazy.
And-
Um,
and to the earlier point, the city had not had a signal contract in place since like the eighties.
Right, well,
So-
20 years
so-
from now, the city's not gonna have a contract in place to maintain that.
We do now. We do now.
I'm talking 20 years from now, when Ted Gerber is no.
Sure, well,
Right.
no, I have hope that, the city can continue on a path that once that gets maintenance issues resolved and the deferred maintenance sort of comes to an end with these projects. But to your point, yes, I don't think there's any, regardless of whether we implement that particular technology, all of the signals in the city are going to be, advanced controllers, advanced detection systems. We're moving away from these loop detection systems. So even if we don't implement these types of things, it's a really good point. There will have to be dedicated maintenance resources for these new signal systems, no matter what.
I think in here, there's also Rango recommendations. It looks like radars.
Exactly. Yes.
Question, I know we keep going.
Two quick questions. Bulb outs are each corner is being pulled out in this design, right? Is that correct? Or is it only certain corners here?
Yes, because this is the lanes are being narrowed, or the number of lanes is being reduced. So
You
you've
have a
got
bulb out at each corner.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as it stands now, Huntington Drive turning onto Ringo, whether you're going west or east, is there a dedicated right as we sit here? Or not?
From Huntington to Marengo, I don't believe so.
Okay. And but the bulb outs are doing, tell me if I'm wrong, is they are not only benefiting the peds and cyclists, it's also sharpening the angle for the right turn. Is that correct? So right, basically, if these bulb outs are put in as designed or planned, the right turn is going to be a little slower to maneuver.
Yeah, like a reduced radius.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering.
Yeah.
So this business of the raised crosswalk, whatever we're calling it, we've sort of beaten it to death, but I just wonder if it's necessary if we're already making the right turn slower and tighter, right, and more controlled than what it is currently. So
Sure.
it isn't, maybe it's something that might be nice to have, but isn't really that necessary. I just wanted that. Oh, sorry. The other question. Is part of this concept replacing all the signal equipment on Huntington or no? Just certain. Yeah.
Yes. So, there's only a handful of signals on Huntington as opposed to Fremont. But yeah, that would be part of that measure, our funding.
Fletcher, Marengo.
Exactly. Yeah. And, upgrading the heads and the arms and the poles. Exactly.
Just like we're planning for Fairhope.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the idea.
Sorry, but I gotta mention that.
Sure.
Again, Commissioner Abelson mentioned that when you take out the area where you can make a right turn outside of the through traffic, you're more inclined to wait for the pedestrian to cross the street or for the bicyclist to pass by before you turn. Now, what we have here is a through right lane. So when you've got traffic behind you, you're less inclined to wait because you don't want to be rear-ended. So I think as a safety measure, you really want to have that space to make a right turn outside of the through loop. And because this is one of our most
Traversed.
traversed intersections by students, we have 2 crossing guards here. Safety is a priority here. You want to make sure that that you stop and yield for pedestrians and bikes as you turn. And when you have that, when you use the tool design and you take out all the right turn lanes and such, you don't have that. So as a safety measure, I really think we need the space to make a right turn. The parking space basically is what we have today.
Sure.
I don't think we want to give that up at this intersection.
Okay, thank you for that. So let's jump on to some of the other concepts here. So Court Avenue, we're all familiar with this. Currently, it's a very long crosswalk with its unprotected crosswalk. It's about 120 feet wide. So again, Fair Oaks, I'm sorry, Huntington continuing this road diet concept. In this location, they are moving the bus stop. So currently the bus stop is on the north east corner. So it's being moved to the northwest corner away from the crosswalk. And then they've implemented this two-stage crossing. So you don't just have the median nose that's currently the median nose doesn't cross the crosswalk, but you just have that central median nose. This is introducing two refuge locations. And then you have the south frontage road, and that provides some buffering and on-street parking. So that starts, I think the tool concept that starts a little closer to past Dos Robles, basically east of Dos Robles is where that road starts.
So I think the south side is easier here because you don't have as many driveways on the south side. The north side has many more driveways, right?
Right.
But it kind of brings up the issue with the parking and the bike facility that, when you're making a right turn into those driveways, you're probably going to have to remove a lot of that parking because if a car's there, it's not going to provide you adequate visibility turning right. But the south side, you don't have as many driveways, right? So you can.
Yeah, that's a good point. It doesn't really show it here. You only see the two driveways, but there's quite a bit more.
Right.
Yeah. So
All right, quick question.
sure. Yes.
Is there any kind of RRFB or other type of signal that's kind of this crossing?
So, under the circumstances that we can't reconfigure this whole intersection, what we're going to ask the designer to do is to look at a pedestrian crossing signal here, likely something like a hawk for court. We think that makes sense.
And I'm sure we have a study. Data about the number of, is this a high, I just don't know. Is this a relatively highly used?
So there is a warrant process for hawks that do, typically you have to do a pedestrian count exercise. We don't have a count here, but that's something we would have to do under the designer to look at that question.
But it's our understanding that there's a significant need to do it to something like.
We hear about it quite often, and especially because of the bus stops, and then the multifamily housing in the area. So when you're walking through there, you'll see somebody crossing almost every time. I don't know if that means that there's absorbent amount of crossing, but it's
That's
pretty
an
frequent.
interesting point, because I think what you are getting is, I have a friend right there. And one of the point was that the bus stop is what's driving. So is the other question, is there a better location for the bus stop or near a signal?
Well, it's just so
Potentially
far away. Like
Yeah.
the next signal is Fletcher and then Garfield on the other side. So it's just a really far distance to walk. Sorry, Marengo. And then
Rango,
yeah,
Fletcher,
Fletcher. Yeah, so it's Fletcher, I believe. Yeah.
and there's a bus stop here.
Right, exactly. So this is also another concept that we didn't really see coming. It's a little bit hard to see. But so at the moment this is Electric Avenue or Electric Drive. I don't remember the designation for this. And then that's is that Wayne, I think.
Yeah.
And so right now at the moment there's you could drive, there's like an access road that goes through here that connects to Pine Street. So Tool is recommending to reduce speeding and cut through traffic, people trying to avoid the Garfield Atlantic intersection, to actually remove that access route right there and, add, that's an opportunity to add green space. So again, you can see the bullet points here: avoiding the queue at Garfield, removing the high-speed shortcut, and discouraging cut through in the neighborhood. And the interesting thing about this is that these homes right here don't have driveways here or on electric. There's basically a network of walkways through the homes. So removing that, there's nobody really accessing their home from that area. There's no parking on that access route. So it makes sense. It's just it's pretty large reconfiguration in the area.
Is Pine Street, South Pass, Alhambra, both? Where is the,
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that this landscaped area is in South Pass. But I think part of Pine Street is in Alhambra, if I remember correctly.
okay, I think,
Yeah. Yeah, it might be hurt if you haven't.
because it's an interesting concept and I like it. I just was thinking that, oh, well, this is something that's benefiting the residential homes on.
Yeah.
And
Actually, so Pine Street is in South Pasadena.
Okay.
The property line, those homes are in Alhambra, but the boundary, you can see it there.
interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's not that accurate. It's probably more likely to be along the south end of Pine Street. Yeah, probably.
Sort of like Columbia Street.
Yeah, and Alhambra. Yeah, the way
So
that
fortunate that way.
right, exactly. Yeah.
So just pointing it out and wondering if it's something that maybe Alhambra could help us with, if that's something we proceed with in light of the fact we probably have to coordinate with them and it's benefiting them, just seed planting.
Sure.
But I like the concept. It makes a lot of sense. And the only thing I would say, my continual plug to be careful where we put bulb outs is people making a right turn from Huntington Drive onto
Those roadways. Yeah.
right? It might be helpful for them to have a little protected right turn lane, be able to do that instead of being, with all the traffic coming right behind them, waiting to make that sharp turn. So there's something to keep in mind if we do that. But I like the idea.
It's also difficult when making a right turn right now out of Dos Robles to find the gap because you don't know if traffic is continuing east on Huntington or they're making that right on Pine. Does that make sense? Like you're heading north on Dos Robles and you want to make a right turn
On Pine Street.
No, you want to make a right turn from Dos Robles to
Oh,
Huntington.
got it. Yeah.
You don't know if the traffic in the third travel lane is going on Huntington and continuing. Like you
Sure, you don't know if it's going on
to find a
Pine or-
gap where
yeah,
they're going.
Understood.
Pine.
Yeah.
Because right now,
Thanks.
if you were to go to Ralph's, the shop, to head back to South Pasadena, the movement you take is you take a right turn and head down Atlantic. You make a right turn on Pine. You go down Pine. You make a right turn on Dos Robles. You make a right turn on Huntington. You go all the way across and
And
then
make a U-turn.
you make a U-turn to head west of Huntington. That's the traffic movement to basically exit Ralph's. Because there's really nowhere to make a left.
Yeah, the only way you can do it is if you can get out and the traffic's not backed up, is to go up and make a U-turn at Los Robles. And then come back that way. But that's hard. It's hard to get across the lanes to the left-hand turn lane on Los Robles.
So I think it's a good idea.
Yes. Yeah. So, just to look at that in a different perspective, if you don't mind jumping back to the presentation. Bill, thanks for going to the fire yell. We have a cross section. I'll go right there. That's perfect. Oh, jumping onto a different screen there. There we go. There's our cross section of Pine Street, basically just showing that little new park area on the left. And, the cross section we've been talking about in Huntington, with separated bike lanes on the right there. And then, the last intersection on the east side, is the Huntington, Garfield intersection. So, here they are, recommending that there are right turn lanes, and that's to promote traffic to be able to head south to prevent that Pine Street cut through traffic that's being that is concerned in another location.
And Ted, where would you say our boundary is? How much can we control here? 'Cause I thought we only could go the city's boundary was
Sure, the city's
Garfield.
boundary is basically Garfield. So just like at Pasadena, just like at Alhambra, they're recommending, a lot more that's within the jurisdiction.
yes,
just 'cause-
Atlantic, I believe. We get partially into Garfield, I think, is our boundary, and then beyond that, going east, we don't have jurisdiction. But what you're saying is we need to partner.
With San Marino, exactly, yeah. So, they're limiting the northbound, movement into the Garfield neighborhood there by reducing that to, one lane. Or limiting it to one lane, I should say. And then, just like we're seeing on the other sections of Huntington, the Huntington westbound movement is, 2 lanes. So San Marino, somewhat keeps their configuration east of Atlantic. And that's where they have a frontage road there already. You kind of see it's like, it's more for those businesses on the north east side. But it gets the lanes narrow as you're coming to South Pasadena.
But they're showing the fact that you would go back to the 4 lanes potentially in San Marino.
Right, because this is an existing configuration.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do they then configure into our 2 lane?
So you can see the transition is, what happens is this is all existing. And this is also, existing with the exception of removing, there's that, sort of bypass right turn lane that is currently here. So that gets moved over to this, right turn lane here. And that's how you get your 2 lane reduction into to Southwest.
And I'm thinking of this 4 lanes that are over here on the east. You're going, and all of a sudden I'm going into,
Because you got 2,
those are right hand.
these are 2 left turn lanes.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
one's left turn, one's right turn, and then you have the 2 through ones that now
Right.
go
This
into R2.
doesn't line up exactly. You can see here to the 2 through lanes here.
Is there any way to simplify this intersection? Zooming out. It's just one that you have so many different legs, right? And do you need them all?
Well, I mean, you have, I don't remember what this is right here,
That's,
but you have a building
yeah,
here.
an
No.
old Tui's.
No, Tui's was in the in and out parking lot.
Oh, the pizza place, or now the, whatever it's gonna be. Noodle place.
Right. So
And there's a burger place.
it's Pizza Hut and Wing Street.
Zooming out, a community challenge.
Right.
Come to us with a way to simplify this intersection.
Yeah, a lot of volume off of Atlantic into the In and Out parking lot there on the east side. So yeah, I think really what they're trying to accomplish is just the interface into South Pasadena. Okay. So if we're ready to keep going, the last intersection is actually on the other side is Maple Street, which we kind of started at Fremont and moved east, and now we're heading all the way back west. So Maple Street, very similar to what you saw on Marengo here with the raised crossing. They've moved the bus stop to this side. They have a comment here about potentially changing parking configuration here to diagonal, but in the concept, it's parallel. And they also have a idea here to add a crosswalk to the south side, but at the moment they're just maintaining the existing crosswalk on the north side that actually does move through the median toes right now. So basically the big change here is the bulb outs with the shade trees and the raised and crosswalk and the sort of narrowed entry into the Maple neighborhood right there.
So is the raised crosswalk just kind of a standard feature they just put anywhere they're looking at an intersection, or is there a problem here?
I think you'll see, so ideologically, they're looking at raised crosswalks, bulb outs, and remove turn lanes to sort of control or calm turning and entering into side streets that come off of main arterials. One of the ideas they see a lot. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was absent for a minute, but one of the benefits here is there's no signal, there's no control here whatsoever.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So that you got that refuge as a result of that.
And I know that your priority said this, I apologize, but that there's a high volume of traffic turning left onto Maple, right, from Huntington. And then
right, northbound
Right.
Huntington to left Maple, yes,
Yeah,
or to
and
east.
access
West.
Meridian.
Yeah. So I think that's the last design concept. I add this slide just to remind us all about some of the other recommendations that came out of the Marengo study about the offset, moving the median noses, which does have a negative impact on the bike lanes. AGA's recommendation was having to reduce the bike lane length towards the intersection there. But certainly the signal improvements that can happen at Marengo as well as the other Huntington intersections, we think definitely should be included in the project scope.
Question,
Yes.
8 inches, 12 inches, vehicle head indication, what? You just watch that out.
Sure. So they basically the size of these signal heads they're recommending to make bigger.
Ted, that's not a big project, right? That's a work order, isn't it? For someone just to order the bracket for the signal head.
The signal head itself, but if you wanted to also change out the poles, the mast arms, and add the detection systems, that would be the
Right. But the
bigger
signal head pretty simple, right?
Sure. Yeah. I'm just sharing what the recommendations were of that study versus what the tool recommendations were.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that the tool stuff is it's going to require like a lot of work, a lot of planning, and you kind of mentioned environment, that sort of design works and community engagement. This is just
These are
easy stuff
some
that doesn't have to wait.
right, like moving the cabinet on the north east side. Those are some of the things that came out of those other recommendations. So, we talked about this a little bit earlier. The MAP funding program came to us and said that the original allocation for each project was $8 million and that the city had applied for $6 million. And the breakdown of that is basically what you see here on these maps way back in the beginning here. Oh. So it's ramp upgrades at pretty much every intersection. It's where you see the R's on this map. There's basically R's all the way down Fremont, and on Huntington is green and Fremont is purple. Sort of a little bit of a vague description of bike facilities along the whole corridor, which in the text of the funding agreement is bike routes, bike lockers, bike boxes, specifically the ramps improvements, the bus platforms at several locations, the bus platforms with new bench and trash receptacles at several locations, upgraded signals at pretty much every location except for, you know, the ones that aren't operated by the city. So you don't see one at Columbia and you don't see one at Fremont or Huntington, but every other intersection has upgraded signals. And then you have this symbol that shows like median pedestrian improvements. So 2 at Marina Vista, 2 at Fremont Huntington, 1 at Maple, where that crossing is, 1 at Court, where that crossing is. So this is all stuff that is already included in the funding agreement that should be implemented by the project. So we have so many ideas here, especially with the tool designs, that we could have plenty of things we could spend another $2 million on. So we did put in a funding request, the extra $2 million, and we focused on these intersections. And I'm pulling up here. We mentioned this briefly at our last meeting. These intersections where we thought that we have additional scope that we could add. So for example, at Buena Vista, we have these islands and crosswalks and this new sort of curb line. At Fremont Huntington, though we might not necessarily want to implement the right turns the way that we talked about here, certainly there's an opportunity to enhance this entire intersection, given its proximity to Mission Street. And then Marengo and Huntington, you know, there's quite a lot of ideas of improvements we could make, including the upgrade of the signal. So we proposed those ideas, but according to the funding source, everything we just mentioned is already in the scope. So that makes it a little bit challenging because the scope is very comprehensive but also kind of broad and vague. So we're going to try again. And I think, you know, one of the concepts that I brought this concept earlier is project doesn't specifically call out any bike lane infrastructure. It calls out bike routes, bike facilities, but it doesn't talk about bike lanes. And if we like the idea of class 2 bike lanes on Huntington, and certainly that's part of our bike plan is implementing class 2 bike lanes on Huntington, that's why we started to explore the ideas of like, well, how do we do this without the major reconfiguration of Huntington that we can't necessarily afford this project? And that's why we started to look at the reconfiguration of the lanes and whether that's possible, but also knowing that that would require some major resurfacing work. And even with our PCI score, both Huntington and Fremont already need, at least a grind and overlay along most of the sections. So we're still kind of evaluating all this, but we're going to try to apply for that $2 million again, and see if we can basically flesh out this project a little more. But like I said, it's a little bit difficult given that this project's already supposed to cover so much. Like I mentioned, out of the 47 intersections across both of these corridors, 35 of them are designated with new ramps. And a lot of those need ramps on all 4 corners, which is quite an extensive investment. So our next step is basically to break down all of those baseline requirements of the funding, looking at all the ramps, seeing which ones need ADA improvements, and then seeing how far we can go with additional funding.
I have one small question about that, just the
Sure.
existing plan with the receptacles and the bus stops. All the trash bins, are they going to be compliant with separated recycling trash that I know that's,
They could be, but there's currently an exception in the
Oh.
law for those types of trash receptacles.
oh, there is, okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we could still do it because we don't promote the segregation and the recycling, but we haven't had to do it so far because of that.
And is that just a temporary? 'Cause I mean, I know we're in a different situation with that right now.
Yeah,
For us as a city, or is that something that,
it might
will
be
be a
temporary in the
permanent
sense
effect.
that Cal Recycle has the intention to change it, but at the moment, I think that city bus top type receptacles don't necessarily need to be upgraded to have the separated waste streams. And I think it was really just like a cost benefit balance of like how much, organic material do you really have going into those bins. So,
I mean, it'd be something that would be interesting if we knew we were going to need it later,
yeah,
rather than replace them all over.
I
again.
think it makes sense. And it's actually a
Have
nice
it
thing. You see them
funded.
in LA where they've got the separated.
Even if we're still doing it for however long.
Right. So if we're buying these sort of prefabricated bus shelter type things, it probably makes sense to do something.
One thing since we've covered this is to make sure, does anyone have any public comment on this item? Because they've had the presentation now, so.
Yeah, I mean, we're basically at the end. I mean, I don't know if there's any questions about the funding. Yes.
No,
Yes, of course.
The two
James.
ways that are looking for, it has to be within this project area boundary, right? It has to be Fremont and Huntington. Is there a
Yes.
way to pull in, drag in, use of Fair Oaks or anything like that? That it intersects Huntington.
So the rules were that it had to be within the existing project area. It could not be a $2 million request because costs had escalated or things were more expensive now. It has to do several things, which is, it has to do at least one of multiple things, which is providing safe space for, it's part of the active transportation grant. So it has to be providing sort of like safe or separated space for pedestrian or cycling, or enhanced opportunity, or, promoting those modes of travel. And it has to be something that's in addition to our current scope. So I'll give you an example, like the way our funding agreement is set up is, there's a certain amount of money set aside for that micro surfacing. There's a certain amount of money set aside for thermoplastic striping, for bus shelters, for curb extensions, things like that. So the fact that we proposed additional medians at Buena Vista, we already have a line item for medians on the funding agreement, even if they're in a different location. So that was rejected. So we have to come up with something new, which why we kind of naturally started navigating towards the Huntington bike lane concept is because, a lot of the improvements we're going to be able to make naturally sort of veer towards Fremont because there's so much opportunity to change each of those intersections. Whereas Huntington, if the overall recommendation is to do a road diet and basically, change the entire corridor, that's a bit out of our reach as far as funding goes. Whereas Fremont, we're not really changing the cross section, or at least that's the impression that we get from the commission, is that there's not really a need to change the cross section so much as there is enhance the intersections. Like, we're probably not going to implement that two-way cycle track the entirety of Fremont. It's probably the direction we're going. Some of the other ideas though we want to see through. So with that, if we do want to make these active transportation enhancements to Huntington, one of the obvious goals is to try to figure out how to implement a separated bike lane. So in a short-term project, you may, want to hear your feedback on that concept, but that's where we think we might be able to go with this $2 million. Okay, sure.
Philip, any public comment online?
There was a Russ Kerwin.
Good evening. Thank you for your patience going through all of this.
Sure. Russ Kerwin, I'm at 766 Monterey Road, and I appreciate the diligent work you guys are all doing. So I was just going to voice my strong support for the concepts in the tool design. It sounds like you guys are all very supportive of a lot of these and digging into the details of it, so I don't say a whole lot more in terms of the benefits, but I think it'll be great for the safety and prosperity, walkability, for our neighborhood, our community. It's gonna be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Philip, no one online?
No, there was a hand raised earlier, but I don't see them anymore.
Continue. So Ted, you're going to show us next steps, or do you need specific recommendations, or have you got direction?
Sure. So this was just to share with you remind you about the roadway condition next to the street we just talked about. Lastly was, if you go through the tool design memo, we didn't cover everything in that memo, Fair Oaks, but there's other discussions, brief discussions on some of these other areas of town that you might find interesting. And then next steps. So just like I mentioned earlier, we're really just trying to get into the environmental and design phase. We can start spending this money. We need to start narrowing down design concepts. The design consultant's going to have to help us with that. We are going to source our on-call list and do a small solicitation with that group. There's a lot of talent there, so we really just have to find the right designer that can take us from where we are through to the construction document phase. And we will be back multiple times to talk this through with you as we narrow that down. And not just that, but with the public as well. So we won't probably have as large of a charrette process as we did previously, but we'll certainly have, our design consultant, a community engagement team that will start to introduce these ideas in some meetings with the public to talk them.
And Ted, on that, releasing RFP and doing the environmental, do you have a time frame you're thinking of what the scope is of the timing for those?
Sure. It's really just staff dependent. I was going to share this in my later comments. We don't have any engineers right now. We're trying to hire. Our new transportation program manager will be starting after Thanksgiving. So, getting them up to speed, we're really hoping to release this, really early in the year, as soon as possible. We've already got some of it drafted so that we can get this design contract underway in the first quarter or the third quarter of the fiscal year, the first quarter of 2025. So.
Sure. And I have a question, and maybe this is more of and wanting input from the commission too. We mentioned like community engagement and community outreach. These are pretty transformative, and I think it's going to require a little bit more than an outreach. It's just, hey, this is coming. Like broadcasting it out. I think we heard some public comment at our last meeting as about like community advisory groups or community advisory committees. And, with this being so large, what is the right mechanism for the community to provide significant input in this, knowing that when they come to the meetings, they can provide 2 minutes of public comment, but you have.
Sure. So I think the advantage of that is that we have all of our community touch points now for the SHRED process. We know all the groups, we know all the folks. It's really just about having all of the, multiple sessions with individual groups with a big, public meeting. What I was saying is we're not probably going to bring in a separate consultant to do like a 2 full week design SHRED process again on this. What we'll want to do is have our designer get to work, come up with some early concepts, some alternatives, show them off at the library, have some discussions.
Okay.
Meet with this various groups, things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I was thinking about something a little bit more organized with, because you're going to start getting into like, what's the color of the brick going to be? Like,
Sure. I think we're still a ways off from those types of things. I think if I were to have any immediate goals, it would be like, if you ask me what's included in the Fair Oaks project, I can tell you like signals, it's something to do with the ADA ramps. We're not exactly sure yet. And it's the median noses. Like that's what we're scoped for. That's what we're going to do. This project, it's like, it could be anything really, other than what I showed you on the screen, which we have to do. So I think if we can get into that phase of like, okay, this is what the project is going to be, this is what we're going to focus on. Now get into like, what is that gonna actually look like? Which design are we gonna pick? You know, how is this gonna impact, you know, a cyclist? How's this impact? Then I think definitely we want to have that advisory. But I think we need to sort of move out of the idea phase and into like solidly committing to a scope and then drill down back into the ideas with those groups. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and did we not, we have shared with the public even this plan. I remember being at a community outreach for at the library where.
Yeah, we
totally-
showed them the concepts and we ended that, and now this is available online. Again, it's really just about biting off a piece that we can take on with this particular project.
To me, that's the key, is that we figuring out from your laundry list.
Yeah.
Do you know you've got certain things you have to do, you've got the sidewalks, intersections, the ADA? And then what's that cost? What are we left with? What does this element cost? What, I mean, we're gonna have to be realistic.
Yeah, and then what can be later phased? Like, what are we precluding ourselves from doing if we take this route? That we won't be able to do later if we do it this way.
The alternatives.
Exactly.
How they
Yeah.
impact. Yes, Commissioner Fisher.
So you're talking about a limited budget and what can we do now? There's a lot of ideas out here. Some are very immature, some are very interesting, but we have limited funds. So you mentioned that possibly Huntington Drive could be staged such that the first stage would be to install the bike lanes and basically just narrow the vehicle lanes in the parking area to fit them in. The concern is that either if the bike lanes are next to moving traffic, the lane widths are a little tight, or if you put them between the curb and the parked vehicles out in the street, still the width for the bike lane would be very tight and would be near the open doors. I would like to see bike lanes installed on the lane. I would like to see it done as part of that first phase. I'm not ready to say, as some of my fellow commissioners are, that, oh, we just need 2 lanes each way. I don't know that. But I have to wonder, how much would it cost simply to narrow the median 2 feet each side? We put a new curb and gutter there such that you would have a room for buffered bikes. How much would that cost off the top of your? 2 million, or was it 20 million?
It's not 20 million. It's probably in the couple $1 million area, because you know we're changing we have to just to repave Huntington alone. So let's say that's somewhere between $5 and $12 a square foot or something like that, based on our costs of grind and overlay. We're already in a couple $1 million for the whole section of Huntington. So even if we didn't do, say, lanes number, 2 and 3, and we just focused on lane 1 so that we could make that transition to the curb, you're probably talking, to redo the concrete work and then repave that number 1 lane that's next to the curb. Yeah, maybe a couple $1 million.
So if that's in the range of a couple million, and we have a $17 million project, trying to get 2 million more, Huntington's probably the most important street going to the city, going through the entire city. Why should that not be our number 1 choice?
Sure. I think the only concern is, and so referencing not the only concern, but one of the major concerns is referencing those other slides is, so at the moment we have a 20-foot median. The tool design, let's say we in some future world that we want to migrate towards the tool design, that has a 26-foot median because it is showing that there's lane reductions. So if we're going to do a median reduction, we'd want that to be part of our sort of more permanent long-term plan for Huntington, so that we're not doing a median reduction and then later on we're going to change that again. So that's one of the concerns, is that whatever we do, we'll want it to be consistent with what our what the future plan would be for our.
But the existing median today does not fit in that tool.
It doesn't, but then again, if we, and then I'm just,
So you'd have to reconstruct the median anyway.
well, what I'm saying is if we didn't reconstruct any medians or curbs, if we were able to make some meaningful improvements to Huntington without doing that, that'd be a few $1,000,000 we could apply somewhere else and then, you know, reserve for a larger idea. So it's not that we wouldn't do that. I think it's a real possibility. We should consider it. To answer your questions though, why would we just jump to that? It would be only because we really want to think about the bigger picture about phasing these projects. And if that would conflict with a later phase, then we want to
But the tool design gets you into a whole lot of other features that we don't know in the course of time if that would be what the. It's got
Exactly.
a lot of features.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, I'm just,
Yeah.
this
Sure.
is my last chance,
Oh,
you know, get these ideas out there. But that would be my
I think that's a really good idea. I think at a minimum, we'll want our designer to evaluate that, especially if, you know, we want a safe bike route. We want all the pieces to fit together. And if we need that right away space, that makes the most sense to do it that way. If that's the direction we want to go, is to reduce the median size. And in that, we could even turn that median into like a green street, you know, which would accomplish other goals. So that median could infiltrate, you know, water in that project, things like that. So there's a lot of validity to the idea because we can accomplish a lot of the city's other goals by making that type of transition.
One of the things they did propose is eliminating the median. Or taking them out and putting in, if you will, like water retention, water capture. Yeah. And then you've got your space, you're building up your space for your bike lanes or issues. And then you're doing a water saving feature and.
Sure, again, it just comes back to like, what can we afford, you know? So
Right.
a whole median removal and reconfiguration, probably not into this project.
Be interesting to see if there was an element, meaning like we only do it from Fletcher to Meridian. You know what I'm saying? That you might want to almost as a pilot yourself. Create an area, not everything, but then you want to make sure you're connecting where that water, how it's flowing, where it's going, or just going into the aquifer. You're actually going to be able to get it somewhere else.
So I've been working on Huntington Drive stormwater project since I got here, and it's very difficult. It's a lot of it's even more difficult than a transportation project in terms of like the regulatory nature of it, and you know all the things to address. Yeah.
As your deputy money to do it for us.
I have sat through the presentation for that on the other commission. Yes, it is very complicated for the Huntington portion, especially, right? Like for it, because at that meeting, knowing that I've been on this one before, I was saying like, "Ooh, opportunity! Can't these two things come together?" And it seems like the requirements for both are
Just the
fight each other.
cultural resource, tribal consultation issues alone on Huntington Drive are there's a lot to address. So.
I have a question. So is one, assuming there's consensus of now removing one of the travel lane, say, which I support. Is that one of the options here, if these grand ideas are too expensive at this time, adjusting the width of the median won't work because of the long-term possibilities, let's say. Just striping it, whether it's that micro overlay that you talked about, and then removing one of the lanes and putting in a buffered class 2 bike lane and 2 lanes. Like, can we get to the point where we could just do that, or does that require something more than are there studies that are involved? Are there approvals beyond what the city wants to do that are involved, or can we decide, assuming again everybody's on board?
So technically there'd be some complications because, you know, it's like a little bit better than a slurry. It's really not gonna be a long lasting pavement treatment, especially with a lot of the cracking that we already have on Huntington Drive. So if you're doing that, and then we're gonna do a restripe, to get new thermoplastic to actually stick on a new roadway and for that to be effective. Right now, Huntington Drive is all box dots. It's not even plain. So, the surface treatments alone, to make that work, there's a practical challenge there. So there's investment there. Now, the modeling is an issue because at that point, we are changing the nature of Huntington. There's likely an environmental impact that we have to evaluate. Environmental meaning the traffic implications, not necessarily like from a congestion perspective, more so from like, how is that going to impact all of the different driveways, and what does that do to the entire corridor, let alone whether any of our funding sources would actually allow us to do that as an eligibility.
I'm sorry, what environmental impact? Aren't bike facilities like categorically exempt from CEQA?
Yes, I think the commissioner was talking about the lane reduction also.
Isn't that category exempt?
I think we would still want to model what the impact of that would be, so that we can show like that would still be safe if we're going to be changing configurations and intersections, things like that. Yeah.
I'm just trying to. Yeah. So the next iteration, you're coming back with a more limited set of concepts, projects, ideas. Is that right? And that are potentially feasible within the amount we have, or more long-term, and then we're still gonna have to try to come up with shorter-term concepts.
I think we'll want to try to arrive. I think we'll want to. Sorry if it was the earlier or latter. I think we want to arrive at what we want to do now, and we want to demonstrate that it won't preclude us from doing some things that we want to do later.
So is it kind of a phased approach with the idea of reaching the goal of something close to what the tool design is, or something in between? That is like,
Sure. So the way I view the tool design is that, we had a lot of public input about what their concerns were. A lot of excitement around the tool designs, certainly some concerns about the practicality of them from the commission and others. So I think that we've got some clear goals about, cycling improvements, pedestrian improvements, access to, economic development, access to businesses. I think that if we keep all those things in mind and think of that as like the tool design ideas, not necessarily like the intersection is going to look like this one day, but like the changes are going to provide us these types of opportunities. If we can come up with a design that doesn't prevent us from achieving some of those things later on, and done our job. So, it's hard to conceptualize, but for example, like right now on the Fair Oaks ITS project, we're looking at the Fair Oaks Huntington intersection. So if we want to make substantial changes to how that intersection operates one day, we're probably going to want to make some interim improvements for people to cross. But I don't think we're going to make really substantial changes on the ITS project, other than improving safety and operation of the intersection. That's going to make it so that one day, if we do want to implement something, say close to the tool design, that we put all this money into Fair Oaks and Huntington, and we basically have to throw it all out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. My only concern being, and I'm sure Fisher, like Commissioner Fisher, who's been here for so long and or I can completely understand his reco of changing the island to make it more safe for type 2 bike lane now, because that seems more attainable. My worry is that the tool design, while I love it, obviously I've been cheering it along this whole time, but it is very ambitious for this city, and its funding issues and resources, just, you know, staff wise, even to kind of carry out something so grand. I'm wondering, when would that ever actually end up happening? And if we are making decisions now to not do moderate changes, do very minimal changes just to keep that as a possibility, you know, 30 years down the line, then is that really, you know, is there a modification in between?
Well, I would prefer it's not that way, but the only limiting factor is funding. So like the reason I'm saying it like this is because we are already limited. Like if we, let's say we want to do, let's say on Huntington Drive, one of our priorities addressing Port Street or Port Avenue, I'm sorry. We know that, let's say we know we want to put some sort of signalization there, pedestrian crossing. Maybe we want to move the bus shelter, and we want to provide some sort of reconfiguration so it's comfortable for people there to use the bus and access the location safely. That's going to be a big change that we can accomplish. We can probably afford to do so. But if you're going to make that big reconfiguration, and then, you know, in the future, you do want to make a road diet and lane reduction in that area, are you going to try to reconfigure it in such a way that it'll work with the road diet in the future? Or is it going to have to be, you have to redo the whole thing if you're going to want to do that? So it's more like that. It's more like we only have so much money. Let's pick the things that make the most sense, that won't prevent us from incrementally making larger changes in the future. That's kind of I think the way we should go, because
you do feel like this could be attainable in the future, like something that along the line, some of it doesn't like.
I think piecemeal, yes. I think that, like, you know, you might not think it, the city has 33 traffic signals. We're basically upgrading a few of them. Do I see one day that every one of those traffic signals is upgraded and has new technology? Absolutely. Is it 10 or 20 years from now? Possibly. But I don't think that I plan for, well, those are just always going to be the old signals. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the same thing goes for the intersections in the city. You know, the city will, you know, go on for hundreds of years. So will the transportation pattern look different in the city 100 years from now? It absolutely will. So, you know, I'm not saying that we plan for 100 years, but maybe we plan for 20 years, 30 years.
Yeah,
I think that's an appropriate thing to do.
Any implementation that is like thinking ahead, thinking it forward, and making it easier for the next phase to come into place.
Exactly, because you know, first of all, we're all going to be judged by this project, of course. So, you know, we want this to be something that lasts in public opinion as a step forward, and not something in like 10 years of like, well, why'd they do that? Now we have to undo that. So, you know, that's very present in our minds of how to accomplish that. So
My last question, sorry, I'll stop, is it safe to say, in the reason like any lane reductions like that is something that's going to be kind of off the table until the other neighboring cities also have it closer to something that's considered?
not necessarily. I think a lane reduction can happen if we do it correctly. If we do a lane reduction to do a lane reduction, I think we'll have a challenge with the funding source. And I bring up the environmental concept not because of the CEQA issues. That's probably not an issue. I'm bringing it up is because, like, you know, any design changes we make, we have to make sure that they're safe and that they contribute to an operation for all modes. And that's kind of what I mean by that environmental phase. So I do think we can accomplish a lane reduction if we would like to. The challenge would be that the lane reduction is paired with some other benefit. If it's, you know, adding the mode that we don't have currently, and that will mean a lane reduction, I think that's a lot easier pill to swallow than like, we just want to narrow the lanes.
Isn't that
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Or a bus or a, or pedestrian walkways. These are all things we could consider. So.
Yeah, so maybe I'm stating the obvious based on Commissioner Fisher's question earlier. The width of Huntington Drive as it currently is situated. There's no way to maintain 3 lanes of parking lane area and the class 2 bike lane. Is that right or is that wrong?
We have an idea that it could work. It's just a matter of whether it's safe or not. Yeah.
So it's possible. If we, whatever reason came to the point where we could not drop a lane, it's still possible to install a bike lane without changing the curb line.
It's possible. Looking at the guidance and the regulations, it's like right on the line, basically.
I'm just throwing something out because I'm trying to make sure that what you said and what Commissioner Hammond said about thinking long-term and being prepared for that, not doing things that are wasteful now, but also doing things that are impactful now, because we're whetting the appetite of a lot of people. Right. And every week they come here and say, move forward, do this, push.
Right.
A lot of us do that anyway, we push. But I want to make sure we're thinking of material short-term benefits as well as sort of the ultimate long-term goal. That makes sense?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
So, adjusting something here or there, if it's not material, it doesn't have a real impact, I'd rather focus on the,
That's exactly the point. I think that's exactly the point. And so like in some of these design concepts, if you're able to reconfigure an entire intersection, it can be pretty impactful. In other of these design concepts, you can't change that intersection unless you change the next one, the next one, the next one. That might be something don't want to implement because we just don't know if we can accomplish that. So I think that's really what we're trying to figure out. Right. Yeah.
And part of it is also, you're saying is where do you make the impact? So if you're taking, what are the key intersections, let's say? So maybe we can say, look, Court would be great, but we need to really focus on Meridian. Or Marengo, because that's where the kids crossings are. That's where we've got all this forward traffic. We're looking at where you're going to allocate money and where you can afford and not afford.
Right. And I think that's why we need to get into the cost estimates and the alternative evaluation. So we can basically have our little bucket. We've got this huge bucket right now. We want to narrow it and narrow it and narrow it. So we've got okay, here's our options. Let's talk to the community about these options. Which ones make the most sense to move forward right now? And not everyone's gonna be happy, but we're gonna get some good stuff out of it.
What do you need next from this body?
So we need to finish our work. We need to sort out the funding agreement issues. Select a designer. So we'll likely come back with that recommendation for council to select a designer and move forward because they'll have a particular scope and fee. And then, so that'll be the next step for this project. So we'll come back to you with that request.
Would that designer be a different consultant than Tool?
It could be, Tools on one of our dozen or more design firms. So we're going to put it out to a number of the firms that are interested. And what we're looking for is, we're out of the planning phase, we're out of the concept phase. We're looking for and some construction documents. So it really just depends on.
Well, I mean, I hope it is another consultant so that you get another perspective on it. We know what Tool will give to us. They're planning, they're ideological, we know what they like. But I think we need someone that's got a little bit more design experience.
It could be, I think that we're trying to really thread the needle on this. We got a lot of concerns. So I think we need to, from a staff perspective, it's kind of one of those things where we know it when we see it. Tool, we'll put it out to Tool. I'm sure they have other teams that are different than this team that we used for this, and they still have the same, company or design culture. So it's really going to be a qualification based focus process of getting to the final construction document process.
I'll just give you 2 examples. That's why I think it's important. we got from Tool a lot of infrastructure changes, both vertically and horizontal. We did not get anything that involved signal control, change in signal, other than, we're going to upgrade our heads from 8-inch to 12-inch, that type of thing. For example, one of the things I mentioned is that I thought should be considered was to put in a traffic signal at Buena Vista and Fremont so that residents can get out of their neighborhood safely, and so that we could manage the speeds on Fremont with the rest and red. And so that also pedestrians could get across the street. Well, you don't see that in the tool report. You might see it with someone that's into a little bit more with design. The other example is Tool keeps showing that wedge design rollout. And that doesn't satisfy the state requirements. You can't clean the gutter properly. It's not smooth. It's rather abrupt. It looks just like the ones we have out of, in my view, they're maybe not everyone shares it, but they're unsightly. And I think that's what led to some of the backlash that occurred 13 years ago. So I just think you need other perspectives on this that might have a slightly different take on it.
Yeah, I think, when a lot of these projects we have this on-call list and we know what the company, we're really familiar with the companies, we can basically pick companies for a particular project. So Tool was picked for that planning charrette process. We knew that would be successful with them. I think for this, we have a very specific need now. And so I think that's why we need to basically reevaluate our team to see who should this go to, because gotta get to the finish line. We got really specific, like I said, we have a really specific need. So
are you also looking for recommendations for a prioritization for locations or locations of interest?
yeah, that will come out of the process. I mean,
No, but now,
but we could, yeah, I mean, absolutely.
is that what?
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like there's interest in Huntington and looking at various facilities that, whether it involves 3 lanes or 2 lanes.
Right, and it might also be where you might want to tap some of the expertise here to be part of looking at. You're going to an RFP, it's designed, but you need to have an evaluation. Might be a little.
Yeah, I mean, that's the
But it'd be
idea.
part of the evaluation to be able to make sure that you're getting this other perspective.
Yeah, I mean, that we frequently use the commission here to evaluate our scopes. We did that for the Tool project. We did it for, our other studies we've done. So that, that's what we expect to do. Just depends on the timing, lots of other factors. But if you have recommendations.
And then going back to your map that had the 3 different locations, are those your proposed locations that you were thinking about?
No, those were
those
what we were trying to utilize to request more funding. So for example, as Commissioner Fisher had mentioned, a signal at Buena Vista wasn't in the original funding agreement. So that's what we included in our proposal to the funding agency to try to achieve more funding. The issue was that the other things that were posing at Buena Vista were already included in so it wasn't a full match. We have to come back to them. So like, for example, that's what we would ask for additional funding. If you were to give us some recommendations, which I would very much appreciate, they would go into the pool that we would give the designer that would say, consider this when you do your alternative, when we give us alternatives about what to spend our money on, consider these things.
Personal priorities. For sure.
Mid ideas. First.
I mean, it'd be, the bike infrastructure is great, supportive of that. Everyone's seen it, and I think one thing that was kind of cool about the Tool design is that they were really beautiful. So to the extent we can find, and I would probably prioritize like an easy win that we can showcase the possibility, right, of what this could be. And I don't know if that's Fremont at Mission, because they had something really cool there, or if it's like the raised crosswalks at a location, but or maybe it's like when you head north on Fremont, when you pass Huntington, and it's super, super wide there, you know, implement a tool concept there to really narrow that. So it looks like, look, people don't want to head to Fremont because it looks like it's almost a street. Up through there. I'm just trying to think through like what are some really easy ways that look beautiful and look nicer than a bike lane.
Yeah,
I love support bike lanes.
No, I think
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think there's that, and I think functionally there's a couple like things that we want to solve that are easy wins. Like for example, getting on the northern section of Fremont, getting people across the street, like that's a problem. This project should enhance that issue. You know, there's a bunch of things that we evaluated this process that we should be able to solve at least in part. This project.
That having a signal will help speeding up your lot. You've got getting out of the drive.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's a tough one because like some parts of the day people are speeding, some parts of the day it's gridlock. You know, those are harder problems to solve, but yeah.
I would just say we spent 6+ hours talking about Fremont and Huntington. So it would be very difficult for me to sit here and say, oh, these are the 3 things I think. And I think you have all of our input in comment.
Right. So I wasn't expecting that from you. If you
Good,
have it,
good.
I do, but
I would just say, it's area.
yeah.
Right. Informality required. Things that have an impact that aren't just decorative, aren't just, you know, trying to look nice for 2 years and then they look like blank. But things that are impactful, I think Fremont, I think the things that are impactful, things at the gateways, whether it's Fremont and Huntington, South End, Fremont and North End, things we can do to sort of make it less enticing, less attractive to sit versus Fair Oaks. I think we've already done a couple of things. A lot of the stuff in the middle, I don't know that it's that people, but places where we can help kids, parents, families across the street, I think that's impactful. I think there's suggestions around the rail crossing on Fremont that might be helpful. It's just, you know, I know it's going to be a process and it'll take a while, but we can just try to focus on things that bang for the buck, right, would be great and things that really would make a difference in people's daily lives. You know, I can't sit here and put 3 things together. I mean, I could go look at all our studies again.
Yeah. You know, I think if the tool memo does anything for us, it did show us where everyone's concerns were. Like that's why people are so responsive to it, is because whether or not a solution that they propose is practical or not, that's just something we have to answer. But we know where we've got ideas of where to focus, because we know that, for example, you know, at Gravalia there, you can't really cross that bridge very easily.
So hotspots and places where we have implementable solutions. I think the ones that are a bit more pie in the sky or crazy expensive, maybe we don't.
Right.
A bunch of those.
Yeah. I think that's the direction that we're already headed.
Yeah, yeah, I think I indicated my preference for Huntington Drive to make it, get the bike lane out there, but not the controversy of the lane. I think also that if we do something on Upper Fremont, somewhere between Columbia and the railroad tracks, the new signal, maybe other things, I think that would be a high priority. We certainly have heard a lot of residents there, so we need to do something. There was one project that came to us when the Public Works Commission was established in 2013. And it was when the city of LA came to us and they wanted to install bike lanes on York Boulevard, which in our jurisdiction is, what is it, Pasadena Avenue, right up to the bridge. And today, to this day, our bike lane in Pasadena Avenue ends abruptly just before the York Boulevard Bridge. And it's easily solvable by just modifying the islands there. The islands in the median, they transition to like zero width island. If those could be removed, we could fit in the bike lanes. And that would make the bike lanes continuous, adjacent to the golf course, adjacent to the Arroyo, into York Boulevard to connect with the city of LA. That would, you know, go from one jurisdiction to the other and be complete. So I'd really like to see that completed. But it never went anywhere because we didn't want to do any work on the islands, but I think if we did some work on the islands, a couple of signals would have to be relocated. We could make that work. So I'd like to see that to make those bike lanes complete. My other priority would be Marengo. I don't exactly buy it, the tool design, because I think there's a much simpler way to do it, and that is to make the bike lanes continuous through and beyond the intersection. The bike lanes end abruptly. And I don't believe in implementing bike lanes if you're going to implement it abruptly because you've got to have a parked vehicle there. So either we meet through Huntington, across Huntington, yeah, across Huntington. They end just before the intersection, then pick up again. Yeah, and either we ought to prohibit parking, bite the bullet, prohibit parking, or widen Marengo in that area so that the bike lanes are continuous. That's a location that deserves the utmost in safety for pedestrians and bicyclists. And so I think that would be my for Pasadena Avenue, Bennington Drive. Perfume.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on to our next item, it's minutes from our October meeting. Questions or addition?
Page 2 of the minutes, fourth paragraph that starts Chris Miller. Just add a sentence at the end. He asked about potential short-term measures to address traffic issue. Next paragraph is missing a period at the end. And then the paragraph right after that, the Rick Schneider paragraph. Second line says he was on this commission. I would just pick one. Probably strike committee. That's why.
Yes, on page 3, under number 3, approval of minutes. Second paragraph. I think the sentence that begins with Commissioner Fisher ought to read. Commissioner Fisher responded to Commissioner Abelson's inquiry that let me read my own writing, that he offered grammatical modifications to his comments to the minutes of the meeting of September 17th, 2020.
Oh, I asked what to change.
Right.
Yes.
Super minor, and the call to order should be October 15th.
A couple on page 2, paragraph third line, she emphasized that plans for a city have a big economic boost. That's not grammatically correct. Sort of, she emphasized the plan should support an economic boost. Economic boost to the city. That's not a good sentence.
Oh, maybe the plan will have big economic boost.
Yeah, is it really correct right now? And also on page B, talk about five. I believe what we're talking about, director, he described the specific, we haven't referenced him anywhere, so we need to probably say Director Gerber. Public Works Director had at the very beginning presented, but then trying to make sure that it's clear. Then on approval of minutes, I think we just say consider approval of the amended. Or somewhere you want to put amended at the end, everyone's making their comments, so. Which might be, or we might cover it enough with that. Vote, so. And you already made the period, and the date. That was all I.
I have nothing to add since I wasn't part of that meeting.
I just have one question. So. Same thing, page 3. We have an item, city council liaison communication, right? Bottom of page 3, item 4, nothing there. And then on page 4, we have item 6, staff liaison. Like, so I just wanted to make sure that's okay. And included, or just seems odd to me that.
Just none. I think it was late, right?
There's nothing. I just want to make sure we.
No, for the record, there were none.
With those comments, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
I'll move to approve.
Is there a second? All those in favor of the amended minutes, say aye. Oh, thank you all. Now we'll move on to our December meeting schedule discussion. Director Gerber. Up.
Sure. So this is quick. This is really just sort of evaluating the capacity for a quorum or need to meet in December or desire to meet in December. We planned our work plan pretty well. I don't think we have anything really urgent to cover in December. Of course, we always have stuff to bring. So just evaluating whether, on December 17th, we should have a meeting if we'll have enough people. We're doing this with all our commissions or something unique about this.
Singling us out. Attendance. I believe that Commissioner Fisher, Commissioner Abelson, and myself are termed out on December 31st.
Right.
Which means we would still be able to be at a December 17th meeting.
Yes, if you were available during that time.
So, and then.
Yeah.
Then Commissioner Fisher shared that he will not be available
Sure.
for the December 17th meeting. Be down one. But is it?
I also may not be available as well. I don't know for sure yet but there might be a work travel requirement that I leave on the 16th.
I'm here and I say, if you need us to meet, we'll meet, and if you don't need us to meet, we'll go. Not, but it's for me, it's up to you.
Sure. Okay.
The only point I would bring up is, my fellow commissioners, is we did not go over updated project. And we don't have it on the agenda for tonight. So
Sure.
we particularly focus on, and it doesn't have to take long, but maybe an update level of where we're going to project 5.
Well, that's what I was going to suggest. Number one, we'll have our new transmission program manager start next at the week after Thanksgiving. So that person will be at the December meeting. We can do a project status update since we haven't done one. So we can, unless something changes, we can decide to have the meeting, at least cover that. If we have another work item that we will have ready, we can try to accomplish that too. But it sounds like we'll have a quorum and we'll plan on meeting on the 17th unless something changes.
No. You're out of favor.
Yeah.
Happens.
Sure. No action. Just it's easier with everybody here to communicate these types of things. So thank you.
And moving on, City Council liaison, Madam Mayor. Pleasure.
Well, this is my last MTech meeting because I will be traveling in December to Fiji. And last week I was approached by Governor Gavin Newsom, and we met with his director of regional policy director, and he actually offered me a list of full-time job which involved confirmation in the Senate Capitol, and then he also presented me with a list of commissions, and he was particularly interested in putting me in a transportation commission. Seeing that there's doing well. So I really I told them that I learned all my experience with transportation from you guys. You're the experts, and I've absorbed everything that you like, you said, and I guess they were quite impressed. But I was just parroting what you guys are saying. So, I'm really, really grateful that I am able to serve the city for 4 years, and this last 2024, my mayor tenure, we really accomplished a lot. So I'll have my State of the City address tomorrow. It started to be 2 pages long, and now I'm looking at it, it's 4 pages. I said, oh, okay. But I'm so thankful for your dedication. I mean, these long hours of discussion, it really educated me about, mobility, safety, walkability, and green space. And I attended a water 1-day symposium, and I asked Director Gerber if we can possibly irrigate our trees with purple water. So I learned that it was very complicated because there are politics that involve in Alhambra, Pasadena, and we're like unfortunately in between. And the purple pipes cost millions of dollars. So, but it was an idea to irrigate our, especially our urban canopy. But that's probably 20 years from now. We have enough funding. But
Water truck. But using recycled water, fill the water truck and then go and went and physically manually, but it had the spray, all that to water the tree, but that was done.
this is like, I think either stormwater or wastewater, and they're actually converting well, it may gross you out, but wastewater into drinking water, and I tasted it and it tastes good.
We're all downstream from someone, right?
Yes,
It's the same water that's always existed.
right, exactly. So I'm really grateful that I'm the liaison for this year, this commission. I value your expertise, and I'll take it, whatever my decision is, in January 2025, we'll see. So, thank you so much for your loyalty and your hours. Patient. Thank you.
Commissioner.
I'll keep it very brief. I was gonna comment on or I was missing the last meeting. I took my first trip ever to Italy. And we rented a car. I can't speak to a ton of bike infrastructure, although there were a lot of cyclists in some of the cities, especially we visited. But I will, we rented a car and drove all in many areas in Tuscany, out all the way from Pisa to Florence, down to Pasadena, and I, over a course of almost a week, and maybe encountered about 15 signal lights and their whole roadway infrastructure, which terrified me at first because I thought it would be fun to get a manage to save money on my car. But it was everything was roundabouts. And from highway, off of highways and major intersections, huge entries into cities, to small country roads. And you want to talk about throughput. It was amazing to not have to ever wait for a signal and everyone driving in organized fashion with the roundabout. And it was good again at manual stick, but it also just opened my eyes. I always kind of look at a roundabout as something that it is a serious traffic calming mechanism. I like that appeal to it, but I always think of it as a stopping, stops everything, and it's like something that's cumbersome to get around. But once you get the hang of it and it's used instead of major traffic signals, it actually makes everything. It opened my eyes and made me love them even more. Around that.
Sure. So I'm gonna talk about a couple things just very quickly and carry on. But anyway, I want to thank Mayor Snyder for your service, the city, both as a council member and now mayor. The amount of time we spend pales in comparison, the amount of time and all our council members and mayor spend working for the city. So thank you for that. We also had the pleasure, some of us on this panel here, working with your son, Sam, the first year of the MTIC. Pleasure to work with. He was a great partner. It's sad to lose him. Second, I've been with Commissioner Fisher on this commission, say a few months earlier this year. And then it's prior Enrich, Public Works Commission. Was it 10 years? Something like that. And I've known John much longer. We first met when he was at LADOT, and I was an obnoxious, aggressive neighborhood protector in Cheviot Hills, fending off development in Century City and trying to protect us from the intrusion of traffic and battling with other neighborhoods trying to do the same. And anyway, that's a whole other story. But anyway, it's been amazing knowing John. I continued to know him, working with him on this commission and the prior commission. The breadth and depth of his expertise, its value is it's immeasurable. So I want to thank John for everything he's done for the city. A great partner. And I'm gonna miss him. And I had some other small things, but they pale in comparison. So I just want to thank both Mayor Snyder and Commissioner for everything they've done. Thank you.
Sure. Similarly, I want to thank Mayor Snyder. First off, just for your leadership on transportation and really like putting your money where your mouth is. I guess that's not the right term phrase, like money where your mouth is, but sticking your neck out for it and putting her counsel. You know what I mean? Like, I just have such respect for elected leaders who do the right thing. And, this year we talked about where we, we had recommended putting in a bike facility and a lot of people were unhappy with it. And, there was a huge backlash that used public funds to take it away. And I think you were, appreciate your leadership, just kind of like in ensuring that we stay on track with that and forward. Thank you for your appointing me to the commission despite 3 years. I don't know if that was a popular move after my 3 years on the commission, but I appreciate your trust in me. And every time I talk to my mom, she says, she met you at the Rose Parade float grand opening, unveiling. It's just like, oh, how's Mayor Znaimer doing? I'm like, she's great. So thank you for your service to the city. It sounds like it will continue, and you have a lot of exciting things on the horizon. And look forward to your leadership in the larger role. And so appreciate that. And to Commissioner Fisher, when I was studying for my traffic engineer's exam, I went to a class in Hollywood. I was offered for free, and you taught one of the class 2009. So yeah, well, I did. Appreciate it. But I think your knowledge and your experience in transportation, specifically traffic engineering, it's been a great resource to learn from you. It's helped sharpen me as an engineer. So I appreciate being able to collaborate with you on this commission, and thank you for your service to the city.
Thank you for all the kind words. Yeah, I was reflecting on my 12 years on the 2 commissions and regret that my time has come. And this is my last meeting on it. But I do want to thank all those that I've had the pleasure to work with, the elected officials, such as Mayor Znaimer, who has been patient and is a good listener and, has taken our advice and listened. I think it's very appreciative. I've enjoyed my fellowship with the other commission, especially Commissioner Dunlap, Commissioner Hughes, and certainly Commissioner Abelson, who I've known for many years. I've learned from them. They say that. And I did want to, though, mention some of the, I really appreciate the knowledge and expertise and patience of the city staff, Public Works Director Ted Gerber. Really appreciate your patience with all of our comments and such. You're a real asset to the city. I did want to mention, though, some of the projects that I would like to see move forward, and I only mention them so that the other commissioners who will remain or get reappointed to the commission decide to go their own way if they wish. But I think that with regard to bike projects, I think one of our priorities should make sure that they are continuous, that they connect through intersections, that they connect to other cities. I was very pleased to see that the Monterey Road bike lane project was completed with the restripe. And that kind of completes something that started years ago when I was with the city of LA when we restriped our section of Monterey Road. So you could match that at some later date. So I was pleased to see that. Some of the other bike lane projects will have to wait for another day, such as the one through Marengo that we talked about, and the one on where Pasadena Avenue meets York Boulevard. I'd like to see those, but those will provide continuity for the bike users. Some of the other projects have not gone through, but I have to have faith that they will. For example, for pedestrian and safety projects, I think that any really busy street or multi-lane street that has a marked crosswalk across it, you need some sort of illuminated device, whether it's a signal, a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, or pedestrian hybrid beacon. I think pedestrians need that added boost to help them get across safe. With regard to our most congested intersection in the city, I would like to see some relief for that, and that would be Fair Oaks and the 110 freeway. And as you know, we developed the loop ramp concept, We looked at another alternative for the U-turn concept. Whatever, I'd really like to see, the most feasible one built through. We really need to correct that bottleneck that we have on Fair Oaks Avenue. Also, our second most congested location, Meridian and, Mission. Meridian and Mission. We'll probably have a road diet there, but I think there are some signal improvements that can be made. And, Public Works Director, Gerber came out to the location. We looked at it together one morning, and I think, the 4 other improvements that I think are necessary to make it safer and to make sure we don't have this bottleneck gridlock at that location. The third most congested location in the city is Columbia Street between Orange Grove and Fremont. And I think we have a simple solution there that I like to see go forward someday, and it's simply to restripe it with a left turn lane down the middle of the street. And that would do a lot. Would sort out the confusion and the lane changing and the abrupt. Finally, I'd like to see the project on Orange Grove. I think we have we'll have some difficulty getting it to be approved ultimately because it restores the freeway Destin lane that was there about 20 years ago. And we were told at that time that we'll take out the one of the southbound lanes, and that will make traffic slow down, calm traffic, that will reduce accidents. And it didn't. What we have instead is a abrupt lane drop that doesn't satisfy the standards, national standards. We have a downhill slope. We have roadway curvature, reverse curvature, all occurring at the same time. And a couple of years ago, when we did an analysis, correct me if I'm wrong, Ted, we looked at the accident history between 110 and Columbia. In northbound, during that period, we had 4. Southbound, during that same length and same period, we had 50 collisions. And most of those collisions were rear end, side swipe, ran off fixed object. And that's because of those combination of things that have occurred there. Reverse curve, downhill slope, lane drop, substandard lane drop. And I think we need to restore order and have one lane for people who want to enter the city and another lane for people getting on the freeway. Don't mix them, separate. And I'd like to see that project go through. I think we're going to run into problems in the future saying we don't want added lanes, etc. But I think we just want to. I'd like to see those projects go through. So thank you for indulging me in this plea for these projects. But it's my last chance to get them out. Want to see them both.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. I just wanted to also express my gratitude and respect. Knowing that she started actually city clerk and ventured to being that elected and onto the council. So her scope of experience, her dedication to the city, quite extraordinary. And wonderful to hear you're being recognized for greater things because you are truly an inspiration. And speaking of inspiration, one has to say that of John, because he has been so diligent in his dedication to commissions, as well as always bringing thoughtful consideration and expertise, history, and also distinguished gentleman, which he is, and inspiration in many ways to many people. So it's going to be our loss to have him not with us, but we hope we will take our calls. We can bounce ideas off of you, and you will keep in touch with us. And I just want to bring up a very last mundane item, because I've been getting calls from a lot of my neighbors I think it's 5 now, streets lights that are out on Huntington Drive. Between Fletcher and the liquor store. Some on South Side, which I think is Alhambra jurisdiction. Some are, I'm assuming probably it's wire. Stolen wire issues. But there is. I'm sure we have to deal with it, but it's a concern about safety. Because it's really dark. And a lot of those just worry about people's safety, the crossing sidewalks and such, and speeding. So I wanted to bring that, but I want to thank everybody. And for those that can join us in December, look forward to seeing you right before the holidays. Madam Mayor, good luck tomorrow on your speech. I'm sure stellar. You accomplished so much this year. And thank you, Ted, for your patience in putting everything together. And we look forward to meeting our new transportation engineer. And many thanks to everyone and have a wonderful Thanksgiving, but a safe one. And to all the public listening, thank you as well for being here.
We officially adjourned the meeting at. We gotta use the mic, right? 10:08 p.m.